Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku became Green Devil and built a harem? Part 4. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is The Green Flame by Pitch_Black_Night. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Reality. Izumi jumped out of bed with a gasp. She thrashed about for a few moments, convinced she was still immobilized, but in reality she was, unfortunately, fine. Her ankle was mostly healed, only bringing a mild pain when she walked. Still, sweat covered the greenette as she was forced to recall the painful memories of what her mind cooked up last night. It was just a dream. Just a meaningless dream. She smacked herself on her cheeks and got dressed back into her uniform. Focus, Izumi. Today's hero training, the real deal. I'm not a disappointment. Far from it. The real disappointment is the one who should have died. Teacher's dormitory. Midnight moaned in delight as she gave herself a forkful of a delectable breakfast. With all the drama and busyness of the new semester, she had forgotten how outstanding Izuku is in the kitchen. If he wasn't interested in being a hero, he should really consider becoming a chef. After the boy had finished eating himself, he redressed himself in his student uniform. The night before, he just wore his boxers to sleep. Little did he know, certain people would kill to see that. He waved over his shoulder before jumping out the window and flying to the third-year dorm. Midnight smirked to herself. Breakfast for me. Lunch for Hado. He certainly knows how to treat a girl. Thank you. Najire gave her long thanks with a long hug. Izuku rolled his eyes but still hugged back. That was his last stop to make before going to UA. Once again, Izuku was the first of his classmates to arrive in the classroom. He sat on his desk with his notebook in hand. He knew what was coming today. Toshinori, Izumi and Katsuki all in the same day. He'd try his best, but he truly doubts if he can hold himself together. The gauntlets will keep him from instantly cremating them, but that might not be enough to let them live. Slide speak of the devils. Izuku looked up and saw two of the very people he was contemplating murdering. Katsuki and Izumi. Not a word was said, just the most venomous glares. Izuku jumped off his desk and went to leave the room. He definitely wasn't in the mood to be alone with them. It's far too early for that. Hey, Bakugo spoke in a normal volume to grab his attention instead of screaming like a rampaging toddler. There's not gonna be any of that quirkless bullshit today. You're dead. Izuku feed before leaving the classroom. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes in an effort to calm down. Kirishima walked through the corridors with an unusually down expression. He was still beating himself up for almost beating Bakugo up. Yes, the asinine blonde would have deserved it, but it's half his fault his class looked like a bunch of delinquents. Man, I'm so lame. Izuku must have been furious about it. He was, but not the reason the faux redhead was thinking. The hardening quirk user looked ahead and saw the very same guy he was thinking about leaning against the wall outside their class. Izuku? Hey man. Kirishima walked up to him and took in a breath. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Izuku looked at him somewhat surprised. Bakugo's a pain in the ass, but I shouldn't have lost my temper like that. It could have waited until fight training. Instead, I totally embarrassed our class. Kirishima expected Izuku to feel something akin to lingering anger, and reject his apology, but he was dead wrong. Izuku felt like somewhat responsible himself since he was the reason they nearly clashed. So to be the one receiving the apology was unexpected. You're fine. Better than me, anyways. You saw what I did to him, and it would have been a lot worse if Aizawa wasn't there. Kirishima lightly chuckled. Yeah, but he was right for once. Whatever beef you have going on isn't my business. Do really think he believes that? Kirishima looked at Izuku in confusion. Stand within 3 feet of me of your own volition, and his inferiority complex leads him to deduce you think I'm better than him. At that point, he'll drag you in himself. Kirishima thought on Izuku's words, and realized that Bakugo seemed angriest when Izuku was brought up. He did tend to glare at Yaoyorozu and Todoroki for getting higher than him in the first day's test. Inferiority complex. Check. He has the nerve to call others weak, but throws a hissy fit when someone better than him shows up. HMPH. The guy's worse than I thought. Kirishima said with disdain. He set his backpack down and leaned against the wall next to Izuku. So we cool? He asked. flashing Izuku a sharp-toothed smile and holding out his fist. Izuku was honestly caught by surprise. But he still bumped his fist against his friend's. "We're cool." Izuku's eyes seemed to soften at the redhead, and Kirishima's smile grew. Eventually, the rest of their classmates came around the corner. Initially, Izuku tensed up, but he didn't sense much fear or ill will within them. In fact, they crowded him similarly to yesterday and treated him well. That's something he would never get used to, but it wasn't unwelcome. And there was one thing they weren't aware of or simply didn't care for. Thanks to the window in the classroom, they had a perfect view to see Izuku getting attention and praise. Everything they can't live without. It set them on fire that their blessings were taken and given to him. "We're not having class outside, everybody in. Now." Aizawa eventually came. Despite his cold demeanor, he didn't dislike seeing Izuku making friends. It lessens the chances of him killing anyone, and in his honest opinion, the kid should smile more, and that's coming from Eraserhead. Little did they know, a third onlooker saw the display as well. A skinny blonde passerby with mixed emotions. In the middle of changing classes in between periods, Tsuyu was unfortunately walking beside Izumi on a bad day. "So Aizawa really let you off the hook for using your quirk in school?" she asked, hoping to see some semblance of unease from the frog. It was futile though, since Tsuyu's face wasn't very expressive, and even if it was, what does she have to be afraid of? "He went too soft on you," Yagi remarked. "The view must be great from that glass house of yours." Yagi whipped her head to find Jiro glaring at her. She would have shot back if the ox-cord-eared girl wasn't right, instead settling for hastened walking. Tsuyu smiled and waved back at Kyoka, who waved back. "Don't like her either, huh?" Izuku asked from behind Jiro, having seen that whole interaction. He found the idea of anyone despising his sister comforting. However, when he made eye contact with her, she almost immediately broke it. "She's always on Bakubich's side, and I have a zero-tolerance policy against bullies. Can you blame me?" Izuku paused for a moment and his eyes softened. Her choice of words struck a chord in him. Jiro noticed his heart skip a beat as he looked down with a small smile. "I like that." After their next class, which was mathematics, Ashido had a look of frustration on her face. She walked to Izuku's desk as he was packing up his stuff. "Zuku." She groaned his name, grabbing his attention. "Let me guess, you need a tutor?" He was right on the money. Mina smiled widely. "Well, if you're offering." Izuku sighed and slung his backpack over his shoulder. Before leaving the pink-skinned girl, he had an answer for her. "Just say when." His voice was low so others, whose names were not Kyoka Jiro, would not hear. For a moment, Mina's pink cheeks turned lilac. "Hey Izuku. Why don't you ever go to the cafeteria?" Tsuyu asked. "I make my own lunch so I don't have to stand in line, and I find a tree I can sit under outside," Izuku answered. "Huh. How about you sit with the rest of us?" Izuku looked at Tsu with eyes that vaguely showed consideration. "If it's about how our class is looking right now, you've got less to worry about than any of us." She reminded him that he was the one that alerted Aizawa when Eijiro and Katsuki were about to throw hands. "Fine, Asui. I told you to call me Tsu, cafeteria." "Well, this backfired," Ochako said as she slumped down in her seat with her female companions, and Yagi. And no Izuku. The boy was sitting on his own a few tables away from the girls. Apparently, when Tsu asked to sit with them, he took it as sitting in the same building as them. Their only option from there was if one of them sat directly across from him. But it wasn't all for nothing. The brunette smiled mischievously. "I managed to sneak the last mochi in his bag while he was talking with Tsu." Most of the girls snickered at that except for two. Yaoyorozu, perpetually staring at his backside, and Yagi, perplexed and greatly annoyed by the development. She had spent all day with a front-row seat to all the other girls in her class go gaga over her twin brother. She had enough and punched the table, bringing Yaoyorozu back to earth. "At what point did all of you lose your minds and start simping for Izuku?" she yelled. She got looks of contemplation, all of them wondering how they should explain it to her, or if they should. Last night, while Yagi was resting in the infirmary, the rest of the girls had a meeting in Tsuyu's room. There, most of them confessed to having met Izuku under the guise of the mysterious Tsu. For Tsuyu, he brought her lost siblings back to her and shared with her and Ms. Todoroki his painful domestic life that he abandoned. For Ochako, He shared a meal with her and Mount Lady after saving her from causing collateral damage. She was shy about sharing that story since her puking didn't paint a pretty picture, but not one of them were disgusted. For Jiro, it was revealed that she was a bully victim for her freaky ears through middle school. One day, Izuku mercilessly beat some bullies into the ground who were bothering her, and said the words that became a core value of hers. "I just have a zero-tolerance policy on bullies." Since then, she's resolved to not only be the kind of person that doesn't let herself be pushed around, but the kind of hero that doesn't let morons take happiness from others. Her tale of Izuku was like her origin story, which is something she blushed at the girls pointing out. For Mina, he just happened to be at the very same library where she was studying for her makeup tests. He turned out to be the best tutor she ever had, and a delight to have around. She looked around their old hangout places to thank him for the help, but couldn't find him anywhere. Toru was the only one who didn't have any interaction with Izuku prior to UA, but already had a budding interest in him from how Mina used to rave about him, and that she is not completely invisible to him. How do they break all that to Izuku's sister though? "Hey, we met your brother when he was living on the street and were pretty interested in him." There really is no easy way to put that, but they had to say something. Yagi. Momo finally spoke for the first time since they sat down. She had been oddly quiet, especially on the topic of Izuku. The refined young lady's opinion of Izumi Yagi and her unpleasant friend Katsuki Bakugo wasn't stellar to begin with. But after recalling her memories of Zu, her opinion of them had hit rock bottom. If they really cared, would they ever ask why I kept coming home burned and bruised? Would they neglect to call me for dinner and let me starve for countless nights? Would they put on a grand birthday for their favorite child, and then forget they even had me? You don't have the slightest idea what kind of house I ran away from. You think mixing words is enough to heal these scars? I've tried more times than I can remember to connect with them. You don't know how many cries for help have fallen on deaf ears in that appalling excuse for a home. What did you do to your brother? Momo was glaring daggers at the greenette. Izumi, and everyone around them, was shocked that Momo could look so intimidating. Yagi attempted to put on an angry face for the sudden accusation, but it was like comparing a candle to a bonfire. And it especially didn't help that Momo coincidentally bore a striking resemblance to Nana Shimura. The look resignation in Yagi's nightmare was staring back at her in real life. What does a spoiled brat like you know? With that, she left the table and, with any luck, wouldn't come back. Momo sat back down, her fist balled tightly. It was so frustrating, not just for her but for all the other girls. Izuku was wounded beyond imagination. Their first instinct was to heal those wounds, not just as heroes but as people he's led in his life. But despite how he carries himself, he's a delicate case. Push him too far, and he may never open up to them again. And they know his family life was awful, but how can they prove it? Inko Yagi, former hero Teleki, is someone they know little about and could have them all thrown in jail. If she hurt her son beyond recognition, what would she do to them? If the apple represents the tree, they aren't willing to bet on the woman having a sense of guilt. Majority of them sighed in frustration, and looked back at Izuku, and the waterfall of blue hair that approached his table. No hesitation, unlike everybody else past him. She smiled brightly at Izuku, who didn't seem to mind her presence. At all. The girls, and boys of Class 1A who were watching, had one unified thought. Who is that? I think she's a third-year student, Ojiro said. What's Izuku doing with a third year on our third day? Kaminari asked. Mineta was sweating with jealousy and lust at this point. And especially one with such a banging body. Just look at those jugs. Her jiggly mmhmfm. Mineta was stopped by Zero taping his mouth shut. Their class already made a bad impression. The last thing they need is for others to think they're a bunch of perverts. Jiro was listening intently to Izuku and the blue-haired senior's conversation. Sure, eavesdropping was unprofessional, but this was too interesting to just walk away from. What are they saying? And why is she smiling so much? Ochako asked. They saw the senior student hand Izuku an empty lunchbox and rub her stomach in delight. She's thanking him for the lunch he made her. Kyoka stated. He cooked for her, Mina shouted in surprise. The purpleette nodded, an uncomfortable knot forming inside of her as she continued to listen. Why didn't you come look for me if you're eating lunch in the cafeteria now? Blue Hair asked, to which Izuku rubbed the back of his head. Sorry, Hado. They got her name. This, Hado, pouted cutely at him. I told you to call me Najire, Izuku. Kyoka was greatly surprised. She says the same thing as Sue. She gasped. Ribbit? The frog girl croaked. Her name is Hado, but she insists Izuku call her by her given name, Najire. The rest of the girls of the table couldn't believe what they were hearing. It makes it sound like. When the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, Izuku was ready to leave. However, he was hugged by the senior, and none of his classmates could believe it. The most shocking thing is that he hugged her back. Once again, the class had a single unified thought. Izuku has a girlfriend. With the scarred boy and Najire, they had just released from their hug, and Najire held his hands after as she typically did. She looked to the side then back at Izuku. So what's wrong with your friends? Did they eat something bad? She was referring to the table of 6 despondent first years. Beats me. Izuku shrugged. Maybe you should cook for them, too, Hado suggested. The first years were awaiting in their class for their next lesson. Tensions were high, not because it was their heroics class, but because Izuku has a girlfriend, or so they thought. The boys were either incredibly curious or super jealous. The same could be said for the girls. It wasn't a concept that was impossible to come to life, but just an extremely surprising one. They couldn't picture the stoic, scarred Izuku sitting down on a date with someone. It was a blow that the girls weren't prepared for. The only solace for Ochako is that he found and ate the piece of mochi she left in his bag. The only ones that didn't share these feelings were the ones that glared at him hatefully. There was anticipation in those scornful glares. Hero training would be combat-focused, with quirks this time. For once, the 3 children of Calamity had a unified thought. I will bury you. Suddenly, the door swung open. I am here. Walking through the door like a normal person, All Might entered the room and announced his presence, not like how a normal person would. The muscular blonde was wearing a yellow pinstripe suit and blue tie, normal for a teacher at least. Most of the class stared in awe, blatant looks of surprise, excitement and anticipation. Izumi and Bakugo grinned knowingly. Izuku kept his head low to hide the look of resignation and repulsion on his face. But while the students awed and oohed, All Might made a gesture for them to calm down. Before we begin today's hero exercise, I feel the need to remind you of my retirement. The mood in the class suddenly dropped. After the fight with the Green Devil, my body was left more damaged than it seems now. I can only fight in dire circumstances. And so, the most heroic thing I can do now is make sure the next generation are strong enough to succeed where I've failed. But I am now retired as a pro. It was quite an odd thing. One of the strongest heroes the world has ever known, throwing in the towel and being vulnerable about it. In front of a class of children. His angle now was inspiration through humility since he no longer had the strength to do it his usual way. It made Izumi and Katsuki's stomach churn unpleasantly, but not Izuku's. For a moment he thought, maybe this was a sign Toshinori had changed. So from now on, you will call me Mr. All Might. He finished by flexing his muscles and the students clapped for him. God fucking damn it, of course. Izuku thought as he face-palmed. All Might didn't seem to realize that insisting to be called by his hero name and flexing his muscles undermines his entire speech. Izuku wondered how he ever looked up to this clown. The former #1 hero clicked a button on his remote, causing the wall at the end of the classroom to open, revealing suitcases labeled 1 through 21. The students cheered over finally getting to wear their hero costumes, and eagerly grabbed them to go get changed. All Might stared at the back of one particular student who kept his head low, but could feel the animosity from a mile away. He had been watching him throughout the day, seeing his interactions with the other students from afar. Every time someone approached him, Toshinori was afraid he might snap and attack them, but instead, Izuku looked happy. Happier than he can remember seeing the boy. While that should have made All Might feel relieved and happy himself, all he felt was gnawing guilt. He was looking at the faded vestige of one of the kindest souls he has ever known. And it saddened him to know he would never receive the same smile as the others did. Changing rooms. The air was electric as the students were getting changed as quickly as possible. 2 things were going to happen today. They would show what they were made of to All Might, and they would finally see Izuku's quirk in action. Tensions were still thick between the girls as they changed, especially with Momo. Although it wasn't very heroic of her to think this, she hoped Izumi was pitted against either her or Izuku, so she could have a bit of karma. In the boys' side, Izuku had his back turned to the rest of the crowd, stewing in his own hatred and resentment. He felt like he could melt his locker simply by breathing on it. This rendered him deaf to the conversation happening behind him. The boys were all talking either about All Might teaching them or Izuku's supposed girlfriend. Bakugo immediately wrote it off as bullshit, and Mineta refused to believe it. But their moods changed when they noticed Izuku was now topless. His body was toned and chiseled like a Greek statue. The cracks being his numerous scars didn't diminish the majesty of it. Holy shit. Whoa, so many, so manly. Izuku finally registered the attention was on him, and looked back over his shoulder. Dude, your bod is so. I can't even, Kaminari yelled, but not looking in disgust. Many others had similar reactions. Kirishima, are you crying? Sato asked. The redhead was indeed crying at the sight. The manliness. He choked on his tears. It's too much. Izuku didn't even know how to feel about that. Mineta was having an existential crisis. With a body like that, the girls would lose it over you. No. There's gotta be something. Whip it out. At least tell me you're average. The muscles are just compensating, right? There's no way you can have all that and be pack MMMFFF. Serotape to the rescue again. Katsuki grit his teeth as he watched everyone obsess over Izuku's body. First the girls in their class simping over him, then a senior believed to be his girlfriend, now this. He's starting to think everybody except him and Izumi are on drugs. Ground Beta All Might have waited for the class to arrive. He was eager to see their hero costumes, but he couldn't forget what he had discussed with Nezu prior. No intervening with Izuku's fight until either time runs out or a victor is decided by capture of an enemy or securing the weapon. When they got an eyeful of Izuku's hero costume. It was exceptionally dark. A dark green bodysuit with black accents and black pants. He wore black boots, dark green shin guards, and a tattered black cape around his waist. Holding the cape was a red utility belt. He wore fingerless black gloves with padded knuckles, and a black metal respirator with curved edges rested around his neck. His gauntlets were present when he pulled back his sleeves. A few members of the class praised Izuku's costume, even Tokiyami nodded in approval. All Might return to the lesson. Heroes and villains in teams of 2 will fight in the designated building. Heroes win by either capturing the villains or touching their weapon, rendering it inactive. Villains win by either capturing the heroes or protecting the weapon until time runs out. Yayorozu raised her hand. Sir, there's 21 of us. Shouldn't we be split into teams of 3? She asked. A good point you make, but the setting doesn't provide a very spacious area, so cramming 6 of you all at a time could get out of hand quickly. But, I've thought this through. The person without a partner will go last, and someone from the first round will volunteer if they've got the strength. Now let's assign those teams. Round 1. H. Hagakure and Shoji vs. V. Bakugo and Yagi. Round 2. H. Yayorozu and Jiro vs. V. Kaminari and Mineta. Round 3. H. Aoyama and Ishido vs. V. Tokiyami and Asui. Round 4. H. Sato and Koda vs. V. Kirishima and Siro. Round 5. H. Ochako and Todoroki vs. V. Iida and Ojiro. That just left Izuku without opponents or a partner. All Might looked at the first Teo groups who were scheduled to go. Alright, who thinks they can handle 2 fights in one day? Izumi and Katsuki almost immediately raised their hands. Izuku scoffed. Now, for Izuku's partner. I'll fight alone. Izuku cut All Might off. All eyes were on him in surprise, but he didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on All Might, unwavering in his decision. Young Izuku, the trial, I'll fight them alone. Izuku repeated almost threateningly. Katsuki just grinned viciously. If he wants to die that badly, I don't see why not, Izumi nodded. Fine with me. All Might could see he wasn't going to get through to these stubborn teenagers. As a teacher, he should bend the rules so everyone has a chance. But as a father, he can't bear to see Izuku in pain and hopelessly outmatched, and not being able to do anything. Idiot. Eventually, the man folded and gave the kids their wish. With that, the first 2 teams moved on to their battle venues while the rest followed All Might to the viewing room. Hagakure was glad invisibility meant no one could see how freaked out she was. She's up against Bakugo and Yagi in the first round. Those 2 are monsters, she felt like she was gonna. Oof. Her bare stomach connected with a sturdy forearm. It was Izuku's forearm. He wasn't looking at her, and instead on the ground where a pothole was. He saw her again. Thanks, she said. Izuku nodded and went on with his path. But a floating glove tapped his shoulder. Any advice? I'm kinda freaking out here, hey. Izuku thought for a moment. He thought back to when he saw her eating. The food became invisible when it entered her mouth. I have an idea. Observation room. Izuku had his arms folded and his eyes fixed on the screen. All Might hid his nerves behind his usual smile. It felt like Izuku's eyes were just one small shift away from burning a hole through the back of his head. Literally. All Might says our teams were assigned randomly, but let's be honest. Bakugo and Yagi with anyone other than each other would go horribly, Mina said. Yeah, and those two go well together. They're both sociopaths. Jiro remarked. The two stopped bantering when Ochako came up to them. How's strategizing with hypothermia going? Ochako sighed. Not great. He barely looked at me and said not to get in the way. Kyoka rolled her eyes, and they landed on Momo next. She was standing a few steps behind Izuku, staring at him while holding her forearm in clear nervousness. So are you gonna make a move, or just keep standing there, staring at his tight butt? Mina asked, startling Momo and making her face turn bright red. What? I wasn't. Don't blame you, though. If what the guys were screaming earlier is true, he must have one fine, toned as URK. Mina was cut off by an ox cord coiling around her throat and choking her. Thank you, Jiro, Momo said. She does have a point though, Kyoka said, surprisingly. Not about his ass, about you making a move. I did, Ochako did. Pinky over here did. Hagakure had her moment. And Sue is probably the one he's talked to the most. Now it's your turn. Mina pulled the ear cord from her throat and jumped to her feet. You could try asking what he thinks about your costume. He'll dig the martial arts princess look you're going for. Momo looked down at her outfit. It did resemble the garb of a martial artist. It's influenced by the combat training she's taken to be able to defend herself with or without her quirk. Momo's story with Zu was probably the most difficult. She met him at a mall where he was harassed by Aldera students. The sad part was he was surprised she did something to stop them instead of just laughing at his pain like so many others. It was how she learned that his family treated him horribly. From his perspective at the time, relying on others leads to your grave. But then, that's not the only reason she's been wary of him. One of the things that the girls discussed about Izuku and Zu was his quirk. Mina and Momo thought he was quirkless, but Ochako disputed that fact by saying that he caught Mount Lady in her giant form. She didn't see exactly how, though, so she assumed his quirk was telekinesis like his mother and twin sister. Suyu disputed that because Zu told her that his latent quirk was thermal vision, which is how he found her siblings and was able to fight hand-to-hand with Toru. He could see her to an extent, which made the invisible girl oddly happy. Jiro said he had what appeared to be two quirks like Todoroki. Speed, because he took down two punks that were bothering her before she could even react. Then flying, because she hopped on his back after missing a bus and the next she knew, they were in the air. Whatever Izuku's quirk is, it's very versatile. Suyu, being the voice of reason, opted to put the topic of his true power to rest for the time being, stating that they shouldn't try to force it out of Izuku since he's so determined to keep it hidden. They would just worry about coming to him about this business, since he didn't seem to be so determined to keep that hidden. After that, they all retired to their rooms, but Momo had something to mull over that kept her up. Izuku and Zu are the same person, but what about a third? Izuku's eyes are easily the most painful to look into, but there's only one person who can compare. Someone who should be dead. The Green Devil. The thin scar under his left eye, it matches the cut Momo gave the devil when she was kidnapped last year. Coincidence? She doesn't think so. She put up a struggle, and she likely saw her display her combat skills, not just against him but also her kidnappers. Izuku was able to counter her moves in their training as if he'd seen her before. He said so himself. He watched someone impressive, when she asked him where he learned how to fight. He's hinting at the truth. It's also a callback to when she helped him by calling an authority figure when there was trouble. And to further support her theory, Izuku looked like he was suppressing a great deal of rage when All Might showed up. The Green Devil was at his most rageful against the former #1 hero, If she's right, and Izuku is the Green Devil, where do they go from there? From Mina, Toru, Jiro and her own personal experience, the Green Devil wasn't a complete monster. But he is one of the greatest threats Japan has seen. The villain team wins. All Might yelled, snapping Momo out of her thoughts and making Izuku bare his teeth. Shoji and Hagakure couldn't defend the weapon. When the teams arrived, All Might gave them his review. Hagakure was praised for her creativity in hiding some of the capture tape in her mouth. That's how she managed to capture Bakugo when his guard was down. The invisible girl revealed that it was Izuku's idea, and thanked him for it. It was then time for the next teams to go at it. Bakugo stomped over to Izuku. He glared at him intensely. The two were in a corner, away from the others. You bastard, you gave Invisibitch a way to capture me. You're just so eager to die, aren't you? He growled. Izuku bared his teeth in greater anger. What did you call Hagakure? He asked slowly. Katsuki scoffed. This isn't about her, it's about you constantly getting in our way. Why couldn't you have just stayed dead? Izuku was overcome with bloodlust at that question. His body was scream IMG to get his hands around the scumbag's throat, but he fought it down. His time was coming, and it wasn't like their little convo wasn't heard. You bastard, Kyoka thought. If Izuku had one thing in common with his deserting hypocrite of a stepdad, it's that they both shared a fondness over the potential the rest of Class 1A displayed. Seeing all these aspiring heroes in action, their powers put to test. Neither of them could help but wonder at how high they could climb. The main difference is that only one of them could actually teach them to better handle their powers. All Might could never hope to be the analyst Izuku is. The young man's mind was a whirlwind of ideas for how his classmates could improve. From hard training to new techniques. Eventually, the time had come. Izuku unfolded his arms and looked down. Behind him, across the observation room, his opponents were waiting. Bakugo's palms were smoking and Yagi stretched out her fingers to the point that they cracked. All Might still didn't agree with this. Izuku may be extraordinarily powerful, but 90% of it is inaccessible to him now. Not only that, but fighting Izumi and Katsuki alone. Let's do this, Kirishima said as he went to Izuku's side. All Might, and many others were caught by surprise by the redhead's action. Katsuki and Izumi more angered than anything. Izuku, however, expected this. He knew Kirishima was just trying to be a good friend, and getting to fight Bakugo would be icing on the cake. But part of it also came from seeing how skilled he is with his explosions, and how well he works with Yagi. He may have been captured by Hagakure, but it was his own carelessness that gave her an opening, and his team still won. He'd be much more careful now. Your fight didn't end that long ago. You're still winded, Izuku said as he walked away from Kirishima. Then take me. Yaoyorozu stepped forward, surprising everyone further. Even Izuku was caught off guard. I've had more time to recover, and you've seen how versatile my quirk is. I can help you. Ochako stepped up as well. I practically didn't do anything in my match, so I'm here if you need me. Iida shared the sentiment. It isn't fair that you should do this alone. Soon, the majority of the class was insisting to fight with Izuku. All Might was frankly astonished. He thought one or two at most would want to help Izuku, but he's gotten on almost everyone's good side. The smile on his face became genuine, just as he was about to assign Izuku a partner. No, Izuku said sternly, shutting everyone down. He looked back at them over his left shoulder, eyes more sad than anything. I appreciate it, really, but I have to do this alone. It's personal, please don't get involved. Izuku wasn't just demanding, he was asking. It was known to Class 1A that Izuku, Yagi and Bakugo have an ugly history, some of them knowing that he is the victim. He wants to settle the score between them. When they realized it was that important to him, they left him be. Hey, Kyoka piped up, getting Izuku's attention. You better kick their asses. Izuku nodded to her and walked away. Battle City. What the hell is wrong with those extras? Bakugo yelled in outrage over how many people were on Deku's side. How in the fuck does Deku have that many cocksuckers? Are they on drugs or something? Izumi wasn't disputing him. Kick our asses. Jiro doesn't know anything. Like hell he can do that. But maybe this is a blessing in disguise. We don't need to go after the weapon right away, it can wait until we've put Deku back in his place, in front of all of his followers. Then they'll see who's really on top. Katsuki huffed but did like the sound of that. Fine, but I get to take the first shot. I still owe the little bastard for what he did to my arms. Meanwhile, what is he doing? Kaminari asked, watching Izuku through the screen. The lone combatant was stacking the useless objects into a kind of barricade around the fake nuke. I think he's planning to leave it on its own. Momo said. Huh, but Bakugo and Yagi are both fast. If one of them slips away and touches the bomb, it's over. Mina shouted. Todoroki squinted his eyes. So arrogant, to think he could do this without a partner. Uraraka coughed beside him. All Might spoke into the microphone for everyone in and around the building to hear him. Look alive, kiddos. It's time for the final round. Get ready to go beyond. The class got ready to finish with him, knowing Izuku would hear them. Plus Ultra. Final round. Bakugo and Yagi vs Izuku v. The Hero team took off into the building, Yagi flying through the corridors with telekinesis and Katsuki on the ground using his explosions to run faster. Both had wicked grins on their face as they carelessly made it through the battle building. The whole thing was a wash of nostalgia for them. It was like being on the playground all over again, playing heroes and villains with Izuku. They have no doubt it will end the same way it did back then. But what they didn't know is that Izuku was reminiscing about the old times, too. When Katsuki and Izumi were turning a corner, Izuku waiting on the other side. Katsuki's gut collided with his fist, and with the speed he was moving at, it knocked the wind out of him. From there, Izuku swung Katsuki by his arm and threw him into Izumi, knocking her out of the air. It was on. Izumi and Bakugo glared at him as they got back up. Izuku put his black respirator over his mouth, silently saying he was ready. Bakugo blasted right towards him. This time, I'll put you in the ground myself. Now die. Izuku saw the right hook coming from a mile away, and caught it. He punched Katsuki hard in the stomach again with his free hand, followed by a headbutt and a right hook of his own to the face, knocking the blonde to the ground. Damn you, Yagi yelled as she picked up Izuku with her quirk and quickly pulled him towards her. She reeled back her fist to strike him. Predictable, Izuku thought. With a small propulsion from the soles of his feet that nobody saw, Izuku was able to reposition himself so that his feet were coming straight to Yagi's face. She put up her arms to block, but her weakened arms still felt the damage through her bracers. Izuku pushed her back with his feet and backflipped away. He was in between Yagi and Bakugo. The two immediately launched at him as he was falling. A simultaneous attack from two different sides. Too easy. Izuku landed on his hands and spun himself around, kicking both of his opponents in the face with enough force to knock them down again. In the observation room, everyone was shocked by what Izuku was doing. It looked like he was winning a 2-on-1 fight while quirkless. Tsuyu and Mina were especially drawn in by his leg work. The flying double kick and the upside-down spin were both moves they used in their battle trials. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Suddenly, Izuku was suspended in midair by Izumi. Kachan, she yelled. The blonde got the message and jumped straight at Izuku, ready to blast him to hell. Not this time, Izuku thought. He shifted his body to the side to dodge Bakugo's blast that would have engulfed most of his body. While he was in the air, Izuku grabbed him by the massive grenade gauntlet and kneed him in his midsection. Ourgh! Bakugo grunted in pain. He endured 3 devastating blows to the gut before Izumi separated them. The surprise caused her reaction to slow down. Katsuki was on his knees gasping for air. In the meantime, Izuku lunged straight at Izumi, making his speed during their last fight look like a joke. She used a wave of telekinesis to blow Izuku back, but it was far less effective than she was expecting. All it did was give her enough time to roll out of the way of a kick to the ribs. Screw it, let's see you handle one for all. Yagi pulled her fist back, it glowed with power and had green lighting dancing across her right arm. All Might saw what his daughter was doing. I know she's in a stressful situation, but is she really going to go that far on her brother? Smash! Yagi yelled while throwing a punch. A huge torrent of wind pressure was launched directly at Izuku, tearing apart the walls and floor as it traveled. Dust and debris was strewn throughout the tunnel, and the whole building shook in the wake of One for All's power. Holy crap, that move is insane, Kaminari yelled, as Yagi trying to kill Izuku. Kirishima asked, an attack like that could have caused the whole building to collapse. She could have buried them all. Momo yelled. In the building, Yagi examined her further injured arm. It hurt and throbbed and the pain was down to her bones. But it wasn't broken as far as she could tell. Because the smash she threw wasn't as strong as the usual all or nothing she's stuck in. If she had to roughly estimate it, that was around 60 or 70% full strength. And of all the times for this quirk to go easy on her, it's when she was about to strike Izuku. Don't tell me, the backlash on me is hell, but it goes down a couple notches for him. Yagi couldn't rage in her head for long as a blur collided with her and knocked her on her back. You were distracted. A cold voice uttered. Izuku stomped his foot onto Yagi's damaged arm. The green-haired girl released a scream of agony. If Yagi's arm wasn't broken due to One for All, it was broken now. He dodged Yagi's attack. Sato yelled. Todoroki narrowed his eyes at the boy. It's like he knew something big was coming, and went around the corner a split second before the attack touched him. He's fast and has good instincts. You bastard, Katsuki yelled from behind Izuku. He attempted to blast him in the back of the head, but a simple head tilt from Izuku made his attempt worthless. Izuku followed up by grabbing Katsuki's arm and flipping to land on the ground with a thud. He jumped off of his sister to attempt to crush Katsuki's shoulder, but the blonde quickly used a blast to propel himself out of the way. For a brief second, the two glared at each other before dashing at each other and locking hands, fingers intertwined. Bakugo heated up his palms to burn Izuku, but the scarred boy didn't even flinch. While Katsuki and Izuku were locked in their own standoff, Yagi had managed to pick herself up and fly away without as much speed as when the fight started. Izuku noticed that, but before he could act on it, Bakugo blasted him to the opposite wall. You were distracted, he yelled as he came in with an explosion at the scarred boy's chest. A heated shockwave landed square on the boy, but when the dust settled, Izuku was unflinching. Katsuki was genuinely startled. He tanked a point-blank blast. Kirishima shouted in astonishment. Impressive, but now Yagi is en route to the weapon. The barricade he set up won't hold against her. Iida pointed out, and I doubt Bakugo will let Izuku stop her. Tsuyu said. Katsuki kept Izuku on his toes, forcing him to dodge and block explosions. By putting up his flames the instant Katsuki's blasts hit him, he prevented any pain or burns from hitting him. When you're hunted by heroes and villains alike, this kind of defensive reflex becomes second nature. The fact that Bakugo couldn't hurt him was infuriating. So you think because you got a bunch of idiots kissing your ass, and you're hot shit. Any quirk you've got is nothing compared to us. You're still just a worthless fucking Deku. Katsuki came in with a right hook that Izuku didn't even move to block. That person is dead. Izuku threw a punch at Katsuki's jaw, sending him back with more force than any of his explosions. And you'll be joining him, someday soon. Observation room. All Might and Class 1A were watching with lumps in their throats. While Izuku and Katsuki were throwing hands, to the latter's losing, Izumi was getting closer and closer to Izuku's weapon. Come on, Izuku, take him down and stop Yagi. Kirishima wished Izuku could hear him. It's no good, Ribbit. They're all the way on the second floor while Yagi is almost at the top. He won't make it in time. He doesn't need to, Yaoyorozu said, garnering confused looks. Izuku knows Yagi is going for the weapon, but he hasn't made a genuine effort to get past Bakugo and pursue her. Perhaps he's thought further ahead than that barricade. They certainly hoped Momo was right, because Izumi had just found the weapon. It was against the back wall, protected by piled-up barrels and planks. Izumi effortlessly flung away the protection in the front and walked to the fake nuke. She was gripping her badly damaged arm and had a scowl on her face. You and I are like mom and old dad. I'm far more incredible, like her, and you're weak and uninteresting, like him. I don't know what happened to you out there to make you think that changed, but it hasn't. You got lucky on one of my bad days. You've got the support of people who won't ever measure up to me or Kachan. And, for the millionth time, you'll lose and be left pathetic and alone. Meanwhile, Izuku shifted his pupils away from Bakugo. She made it. Took her long enough. I was getting tired of keeping him off my back. Blast. Asterisk. Bakugo set off an explosion directly in Izuku's face. For the first time, Izuku actually staggered, which fueled Katsuki's ego. But what he saw next did not. Izuku shook off the blast and opened his eyes in a venomous glare at the explosive blonde. Interestingly, the sclera of his right eye was glowing green. What the uck? In an instant, Izuku seemingly teleported his fist to be lodged deep in Katsuki's midsection. The blonde dropped to his knees, breathless and grabbing his stomach. Izuku wasn't done as he delivered a powerful kick to his opponent's chin, causing him to fall back on his backside with a bloody mouth. In the observation room, the others were surprised by what they saw. Did he get even faster? Tokiyami gasped. His punch and kick just now, they also had more power. Ojiro judged. Mineta was shaking as he gave a summarized version of what they just saw. Why you mean he's been holding back T till now? Izuku glared directly at the camera behind him. His green right sclera was like an indicator that he was starting to use his true power. The spectators shook when he looked at them, none more than All Might. Izuku looked up at the ceiling. About 4 stories up, Yagi was a few steps away from touching his weapon. A few steps away from winning. Not today. He raised his open hand up to the ceiling. Not ever again, and closed his hand into a fist. Mine, Izumi thought victoriously as she placed her hand on the bomb. All Might gripped the microphone, his hand shaking and his smile shrunk just the slightest bit. Izuku, I'm sorry, you did your best, but the hero team wins. Bakugo hobbled to his feet and wiped the blood dripping from his chin. Like I said, you may have a quirk now, but you're still a worthless Deku. Izuku's glare wasn't nearly as heated as it was before. In fact, he seemed to calm down significantly with his right eye returning to normal. Are you sure about that? He asked, confusing Katsuki. You just lost, dipshit. Everyone saw it. In the observation room, Kirishima punched the floor in great frustration. Damn it, Bakugo's never gonna let us hear the end of this. Izuku, why couldn't you have just let us help? Why did you have to be so stubborn? Kirishima, Tsuyu called. Shouldn't the timer have stopped if one of the sides won? Eijiro, along with everyone else in the room, was so engrossed with Bakugo and Izuku's fight, and Yagi approaching the bomb that they didn't think about how much time remained. Their eyes instantly locked on the timer. It was still running. The match wasn't over, but how? Look at Yagi's ankle, Shoji pointed out. There was capture tape wrapped around it. It just came out of nowhere. Earlier, Izuku was seen setting up a barricade around his nuke, and covering the front of it in capture tape like it was police tape. When he was done, his reel only had a few inches left on it, enough to wrap around a wrist or an ankle. He pulled off the last of the tape and threw away the reel. When he turned to leave the weapon and fight his old tormentors, he simultaneously lit the last bit of capture tape in his green fire and hid it behind one of the stands of the nuke. When Izumi or Katsuki got past him, he would be able to see them through the tiny flame, and manipulate it to wrap around his unsuspecting opponent. Present. It seems there's been a mistake, All Might said over the microphone. Ha! Katsuki yelled, and Izumi looked just as confused. Izuku almost smirked beneath his black respirator. Yagi has been captured. Both Izumi and Bakugo paled at that news. Yagi looked down and saw that her ankle was wrapped in capture tape. Single quote ... What? How did he? When did he? Deku. Beat me. She froze, unable to comprehend what just happened. Class 1A was in a similar state. From their perspective, Izuku just spawned the capture tape into existence at the last second. It seemed like he could do anything, including make 2 very powerful foes look like child's play. Bakugo's heart pounded with anger, frustration, hatred and, damn it, fucking body, stopped shaking. I am not afraid of this cheating bastard. He could tell himself that all he wants, but denial doesn't make the situation any less true. So this means, Mina began. Yeah, Jiro nodded. Bakugo has Izuku's full attention now. Everyone watched with bated breath as Izuku slowly walked to the injured Bakugo. Injured in body and in spirit. Damn you. Bakugo held his hands in front of them and concentrated his explosions into a blinding flash of light. Stun grenade. The attack on Izuku's eyes seemed effective as his eyes squeezed shut and he stepped back a little. A blinding attack, Bakugo. What kind of man pulls cheap crap like that? Kirishima critiqued. It's a viable strategy. He needs to find a way to turn the tables somehow. All Might countered. Die. Katsuki came swinging with another right hook. His blast hit. Nothing. Izuku sidestepped the attack, even with his eyes shut. What the fuck? Katsuki yelled before swinging again. Izuku dodged again, then blocked, all with his eyes shut. When did he unlock Ultra Instinct? Shiro shouted. Izuku dodged another right hook and proceeded to kick Katsuki away. The blonde tumbled and held his sore stomach. Izuku opened his eyes in a condescending glare. The heat your quirk generates makes you too easy to read. Blinding me wasn't a bad move, but your moves were too repetitive after that. It's clear to me now. Izuku took a single step towards the blonde, noticing him flinch as he did. You're getting desperate. Izuku hit the nail in the head. Katsuki's breathing hitched as Izuku came to him, his form towering over his hunched self. Hurrah! In a desperate effort, Katsuki released a large blast that engulfed Izuku. He was clearly desperate as he moved to rapid fire. Why won't you die? He yelled. Those blasts are huge. Is Izuku in trouble? Kaminari shouted, making Todoroki side-eye him. Does getting desperate ever work? He asked rhetorically. Bakugo's explosions ceased when Izuku walked through them and punched him across the floor. Don't need to answer that, Shoto said. Bakugo picked himself up. He realized his nose was bleeding from the punch he just took. This is bullshit. Pure, fucking bullshit. There's no way Deku can be this strong. I'll show this waste of space. Bakugo thought as he subtly reached for the pin on one of his grenade gauntlets. I'll make him wish he was dead. You're so fucking full of yourself. Bakugo began to talk, not getting Izuku to stop moving. Laughing at me and Izumi for years behind our back while you had all this power. Late bloomer my ass. Izuku grit his teeth and clenched his fists tightly. This was obviously an attempt to get under his skin. And it was working. Here Bakugo was complaining about being left in the dark for so long. Izuku was the one wondering for 10 years why he was so deeply resented by his family. A sickening, infuriating grin spread across Bakugo's features, further enraging Izuku. I bet that sob story bullshit is why those worthless extras are kissing your ass. They know how pitiful you are. Especially the shitty-haired blockhead, the damn frog and the know-it-all cow. That was the final nail in Bakugo's coffin. Ubastaaaard. Izuku yelled as he pushed off the ground at incredible speed. Gotcha now. Katsuki aimed his left gauntlet so that Izuku was going straight towards it. Go back to hell, Deku. He yelled as he pulled the pin. Asterisk boom. Asterisk. A gargantuan explosion was expelled from the gauntlet with Izuku in point-blank range of the attack. The flaming shockwave erupted with incredible force and speed, tearing apart all in its path, not unlike Izumi's earlier smash. The structure shook due to the tremendous force, making the risk of collapse very worrisome. The roaring blast carved a larger hole that Yagi left in the side of the building. Goddammit, Bakugo's insane too. Kirishima yelled. Maniac bastard, my ears can't take much more of this. Kyoka jeered. He and his partner are alike. They have no concern for how much damage they're doing. And they're supposed to be the heroes. Momo scowled. Katsuki was grinning to himself as he stood back up. Huff huff hey. Hee hee. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha. How's that, Deku? I told you, you never stood a chance. Better learn right now, a weakling like you will never beat me. Ya hear me? Bakugo's boasting was unanswered. Several moments of silence led him to believe that he might have killed Izuku himself. If he was being honest with himself, he didn't feel all that bad about killing the bastard. He should have died a long time ago anyway. And just when he thought he'd be smart enough to take his kind, well-meaning advice. Oh well, rest in peace. Izuku will have to watch from above as Katsuki and Izumi dominate the hero ranks as the greatest heroic duo the world's ever seen. Good riddance. Katsuki's breath got caught in his throat when he heard a voice come from the direction of his destruction. You're fucking kidding me. When the smoke blew away, Izuku stood motionless, a few small meters away from Katsuki. His right hand was stretched out and open. His eyes were hidden by the shadow of his hair. "You're a fucking cockroach." Class 1A was in absolute shock. Not just from Bakugo's deadly attack, but how little it did to his opponent. Todoroki looked genuinely surprised for the first time. What the hell is with this guy? What the actual freaking heck? I'm starting to think Zuko's invincible. Mina yelled in astonishment. I don't know if I could tank a blast that big. Damn, Izuku really is incredible. Hiroshima said in awe. Ribbit, maybe, but he's not unscathed. Suyu said. She was right. The hand that was raised had its glove burned off, and the hand itself was covered in serious burns. And it actually hurt. All that firepower, and that's all Bakugo accomplished upon a greatly hindered Izuku. The scarred boy slowly pulled back his hand and examined the damage with an unreadable expression. You just don't know when to die, do you? Rarg. Bakugo leapt into the air and propelled himself to deliver a powerful attack from above. The explosion rang throughout the decimated battleground, engulfing almost all of Izuku's body. But he blocked it effortlessly with his other arm, infuriating Katsuki. But whatever rage he felt was eclipsed by the volcanic rage about to erupt from Izuku. Izuku's quirk, Psycho Flames, has many facets, including being able to manipulate heat, and read a person's emotional state by the thermal energy they emit. The former, although not completely effective when controlling heat from a person's quirk, was partly how Katsuki's attack did so little to him. The latter is how Izuku confirmed Katsuki's taunts. They weren't just to rile him up and leave him open to attack. They were genuine attacks on him, Hiroshima, Asui, Yaoyorozu, and everyone else. To add another sickening layer of, when Katsuki actually believed he killed Izuku. You didn't care. His voice was so small, Bakugo almost didn't hear it. It was like a whisper. Of course, he thought he was whispering insults. Ha, speak up, nerd, He was interrupted by Izuku throwing him against the wall with a thud. The impact made him squeeze his eyes shut. Grr, damn it, you little. Katsuki froze as he saw those green glowing sclera, this time in both eyes. They were like acid, trying to burn him to death with a glare. They were also hauntingly familiar. Izuku made his way to Katsuki, even faster than before. Bakugo tried putting up his hand to stop him, but Izuku clasped both his hands together and brought them down. Katsuki's gauntlet was destroyed, reduced to pieces in a single strike. Bakugo staggered from both the display of strength and losing one of his favorite toys. I'll put you in the ground myself, Izuku said in a cold, emotionless voice. Like hell you gak. Katsuki had a hand wrapped his neck, squeezing it like a vice. The blonde was lifted off his feet and pinned against the wall behind him. He was about to counterattack, but he was momentarily frozen in fear by those horrible green eyes. A new level of fear took Katsuki, one that he never thought Deku would be able to bring. Now die. The fear for his life. Katsuki released a choked groan as a powerful punch struck his stomach. The blonde, desperate and afraid, had to do the only thing he could, set off explosions. Several rapid-fire blasts were launched at point-blank range at Izuku. They engulfed most of Izuku's body in orange light and covered the both of them in smoke. But Bakugo's efforts were worthless. Everyone in the observation room was growing even more anxious. Holy crap, he's gonna kill Bakugo, Hiroshima shouted. He may be a jerk, but even he doesn't deserve to die. Kaminari shouted. I should end this, but... All Might cursed internally. He was strictly told by Nezu not interfere until time runs out. That just leaves Bakugo at Izuku's mercy. The blonde endured, punch after punch, he grew weaker. The hand clamped around his neck was like steel, he couldn't break free. It became more and more difficult to move and breathe. It got to the point where blood was escaping from his mouth and dribbling down to Izuku's wrist. The impact was so powerful, cracks began to form on the wall he was trapped against. He lost the strength to keep firing explosions, and his arms hung limply at his sides. The last thing Bakugo saw before his eyes shut was a pair of green venomous eyes glowing through the smoke. Art is not mine. Izuku released Bakugo's throat, and the boy fell to his knees, and on his front. His head was cocked to the side with blood staining his chin and bottom lips. Is he dead? Mineta asked. Come in, young Bakugo, can you hear me? All Might yelled in his microphone. Ah Herg, Cog, Bakugo responded by coughing up more blood on the floor, his chest heaving with labored breaths. He was alive, but the demon towering above him could easily change that. Izuku glared down with no mercy in his eyes. Seeing Katsuki broken and bleeding, alone and helpless, crushed by someone leagues above him. This isn't even a fraction of what I've endured at your hands. Suddenly, Izuku was knocked off his feet and blown away by an invisible force. TCH. Of course you're still here. He spat as he rolled and stopped at the edge of the building. Small chunks of rubble fell to the outside. When the smoke cleared, Izumi was glaring hatefully at Izuku. What is she doing? She was captured. Iida said. She's also injured. If she tries to fight with that arm, stand down, Izumi. Get out of there. Toshinori pleaded to no avail. Once again, the twins were staring each other down. Izumi saw Izuku's right hand was burned and covered in blood that was not his. She also saw that Katsuki was struggling to breathe and had blood coming out of his mouth. She didn't need a pen to connect those dots. You shouldn't be here. Izuku told her to leave. He knew she stood no chance. But he knew damn well what he said wouldn't get her to leave. Someone like you shouldn't be here. Aizawa's words from the first day rang in Izumi's head. She remembered her desperation to prove to him and to herself that it wasn't the truth. He didn't realize it at first, but Izuku poured more gasoline on the fire than he thought. Izumi was forced to relive her nightmare. She briefly saw Hisashi looking at her with disappointed eyes. The same Nana had. Shut up, she yelled as she flew straight towards Izuku, her good arm pulled back for a punch. You haven't changed either, Izuku muttered to himself as he lunged at Izumi from his spot, the floor beneath him cracking and breaking. You still think you can do whatever you want. Izumi was taken aback by his speed and the demonic glow in his eyes. In her stupor, Yagi left herself open for Izuku to grab her face in his left hand. You think the world revolves around you? He shouted as he delivered a hard punch to Izumi's gut, causing her to throw up blood into his hand. I'll bury you. He ended by throwing Izumi into the floor, creating a crater on the surface in the shape of her body. To the side, Katsuki was starting to get up. He could barely move, and whenever he did, more blood came up his throat. The weak crackles and pops of dying explosions alerted Izuku that Bakugo was still conscious. Unsurprising. If Bakugo has one respectable quality, it's his tenacity. Too bad it couldn't be ration or humility. Izuku went straight to him and delivered a hard kick to his gut. Bakugo coughed up even more sticky red fluid. The force of the kick was so strong, the blonde was off the ground, and Izuku grabbed his arm and flung him at Izumi. The two of them were left battered and broken on the floor, blood staining their features. Time. 0:00. Finally. This was getting painful to watch. Kaminari sighed. Right, Mr. All Might. Somehow, the muscular giant managed to disappear without anyone noticing. The students were so glued to the screen, they didn't see All Might leaving before time was even up. They did see him when he was standing between Izuku and his tormentors. The man first went to check on Yagi and Bakugo, cradling their unconscious forms. Ignoring Izuku for their sake. He hasn't changed either. Toshinori did look at Izuku over his shoulder. His eyes glaring at his son. You went too far. You could have killed them. Izuku's eyes widened into a pair of hideously outraged orbs. Before closing shut, the green light fading away, he grabbed his black respirator and pulled it down to rest on his neck. He spoke in a low growl, surprising Toshinori by the absolute malice in his once soft and caring voice. They never cared, why should I? The blonde man's eyes widened. What are you? Before All Might could finish his question, Izuku lifted his foot and brought it down in a thunderous stomp. Cracks rapidly formed on the floor holding the four of them. Izuku was able to jump away, avoiding falling with the collapsing floor. The other three were not so lucky. Izuku wasn't seen after that. Observation room. Holy. Kaminari began. Shit. Mineta finished. The class just witnessed Izuku attempt to bury All Might, Bakugo and Yagi. What they witnessed on the screen wasn't a training match, it was much more than they could begin to comprehend. Nezu's office. The White Chimera was sitting at his desk having just watched a live transmission of Class 1A's battle training. He also got the audio pack, so he heard everything that was said during Izuku's fight. Although blood was spilled, he was actually happy with the result. Knock knock. Come in, Nezu chirped, already knowing who was at his door. Izuku walked in, wearing his school uniform. His hand was bandaged, which meant he paid recovery girl a quick visit. Nezu could clearly see the repressed anger in his eyes. It was even greater than when he met him at Tartarus. Did you see Hound Dog? Nezu asked, and Izuku nodded. What did you discuss before he sent you here? Izuku took a seat before opening his mouth. He asked if I had any regrets. I said, I regret letting All Might stop me. The last intelligible thing he said was to come to you. Nezu nodded. Visiting Hound Dog was part of their agreement, but there was one downside to that. Hound Dog had very limited temper with villains, and although Izuku was in a sort of rehab, he has still committed some of the worst atrocities he's ever seen. Izuku didn't completely disagree. What about your classmates? They saw your fight. How are they? Nezu saw the hatred in his eyes diminish. He didn't see them after his fight ended. He just left to get changed and go to counseling before anyone could talk to him. But he knew they had to be even more apprehensive of him now than before. I don't know. He simply said. Strangely, Izuku was glad to have had this experience. Not just beating Bakugo and Yagi, but also that All Might and his classmates saw it. Izuku has no desire to become a hero. That's the dream of a dead man. This rehabilitation won't last. He can't hide his quirk, his actions forever. Part of him doesn't even want to. He's sick of lies and false prophets. He has the capabilities that make him irresistible to all for one. As long as the Demon Lord is still breathing, he'll plot to reach him. Izuku doesn't mind that. He's resolved to atone by taking the madman with him, and giving the people he's come to care about a brighter future. Nezu placed his paws in front of him on the table. Despite what All Might and others might say, you did very well in controlling yourself, Izuku. You kept quirk usage to a minimum, kept yourself from doing what I'm sure was extremely tempting. The most telling part of your character is how you reacted to Bakugo's taunts. You abhor the idea of anyone else being unjustly attacked. Your actions, while malicious, came with good intentions as well. Izuku gripped his forearm. In that moment, Najire's voice rang in his ear telling him he was still a nice person at heart. He didn't believe it completely. So how was it using your inhibitor gauntlets in combat? Nezu asked. Izuku rolled down his sleeves, revealing that he was still wearing them. Even with only 10%, I had to be constantly watching myself to make sure I didn't cremate them in an instant. Nezu nodded. I suggest you get a diagnostics check on your gauntlets on your way back to the dorms. We can't have them malfunction suddenly, and you end up accidentally incinerating someone. Izuku understood that was his cue to leave. He placed his hands in his pockets and made it to the door. One more thing, Nezu called him. Yagi is here because she has one for all. You know what is expected of her and how imperative it is that that power is protected. All Might and Inko will defend Katsuki along with her. They only know about Aldera's bad reputation. I could expel them both. A sinister grin formed on Nezu's face. But after what I just saw, that would be another mercy they don't deserve. Wouldn't you agree? Izuku did answer, but he had a faint smile forming on his lips, and he once thought the principal wouldn't be able to see eye to eye with him. Support Studio Izuku stood outside the doors of the first support course classroom he came upon. Class 1H. Powerloader's class. He got the feeling Nezu had something up his sleeve sending him here for a simple maintenance check. If he was concerned about his gauntlets malfunctioning, why not send them to a major agency? Not a school workshop. And for a fairly serious concern, he sure sounded lighthearted about it. Regardless, Izuku knocked on the door to get it over with. Boom. Izuku jumped back. An explosion from inside the studio caused a massive dent to form on the doors. They almost fell of their hinges. When they opened, plumes of smoke escaped immediately. Cough cough phew, boy. That wasn't as bad as the last few. Progress is progress. A girl voice said to herself. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was met by a girl with pink hair and dreadlocks, wearing a jumpsuit with the sleeves tied around her waist and a tank top. She lifted up her steampunk goggles to get a good look at the perplexed boy in front of her. A wide grin quickly made its way on her face. Oh ho ho, first customer. Before Izuku could dispute, he was pulled inside by the surprisingly strong support student. Mei Hatsume. Support course student of class 1H. How can me and my babies be of service? She's certainly energetic. Izuku from the hero course. I don't need much, just a simple diagnostic check. Izuku rolled back his sleeves and let Hatsume see his sleek silver gauntlets. The pinkette grabbed his wrist and examined them up close and personal. Suddenly, her smile diminished. Normally, I'd jump a chance to tinker with a hero student's gear, but these little babies of yours are better off with someone else. And I know just who you need. Hatsume once again dragged Izuku with her deeper into the support studio. The sound of power tools at work was heard where they were going. They came to a workstation with walls on both sides of the occupant. Mei took a deep breath and shouted. Melissa, you've got a visitor from the hero course. Green and black hair. Izu. Something. She walked away, leaving an unamused Izuku. I literally just told her my name. More importantly, did she say Melissa? Izuku remembered that name well. The last time he went home, he saw it in Yagi's diary. The name of his replacement. He didn't know what to expect. He's never met another quirkless person before. Toshinori doesn't count, not since he tried to run away from that part of himself after becoming a hero. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed teenage girl stood up from her workstation and pinched the bridge of her nose. She was clearly irritated. Izumi, can this wait? I've got a lot on my mind right now, she said. I'm not Yagi. A male voice said, gaining Melissa's full attention. She quickly turned to find, not Izumi, but a taller, more muscular male version of her. Oh, sorry, I thought you were someone else. Can I help you? I was, wondering if I could get my gauntlets checked, but if now is a bad time. Melissa held out her hands to stop him. No, now is fine. Really, sorry, I was kind of cold. Something personal has been going on, but you're fine. Izuku thought to himself. She was in a bad mood and tried to brush me off when she thought I was Yagi. I thought they were close. Meanwhile, Melissa was making her own analysis. His hair is the same as hers, only shorter and a lot darker. He looks way too much like her to not be related. Does Izumi have a brother? Why didn't she tell me? Izuku rolled up his sleeves and showed Melissa his gear. Her eyes widened in surprise. I know these. She gasped as she grasped his hand. My dad made these. Said they were requested by All Might for one student with an ultra-powerful quirk. Melissa looked up at Izuku, who did not look away. Don't worry, I can help you. Do you have the key that unlocks them? She asked. Izuku fished around inside his blazer pocket and pulled out a small red rectangular key. He removed both gauntlets and handed them to Melissa. The foreign blonde removed one of the walls from her workstation and pulled up a chair for Izuku to sit beside her. She plugged in the gauntlets to her own custom-made laptop and ran a diagnostics program. How long have you had them? She asked. Over a month. Izuku answered. Have you had any problems before? Like you can't use your quirk at all at times or anything? No, they work exactly as they're supposed to. Really well made. They've kept me from accidentally killing someone more than once. Melissa's eyes widened and she just chuckled nervously. Well, that's good to H here. When the diagnostics were done, there was no issue to report. Can I ask you something? Melissa asked nervously. It's just, you look so much like a friend of mine. Seriously, like a male version of her. That just came back from war. Are you too? Izuku turned his head and scoffed. I know what you're getting at. We may be related, but we are not family. Melissa was taken aback by the malice and hatred in his voice. She looked at his bandaged hand and grew concerned, as well as mad. What are they not telling me? The American girl muttered to herself. Izuku hummed. The blonde blinked in surprise. And nothing, just talking to myself. It's a bad habit. For a few moments, Izuku and Melissa sat in awkward silence. At least, it would have been silent if Hatsume wasn't tinkering in the background. I've had my therapy for the day, Izuku began, getting Melissa to look at him from behind her glasses. But you have something bothering you. Do you want to talk about it? Izuku didn't quite know why he was offering her an ear. She is his replacement, and the first thing he ever felt towards her was resentment. But he came to realize that he didn't resent her, but the Yagis for doing something so twisted. And it looked like his replacement wasn't doing as great as he imagined. Melissa's eyes widened at the generosity. She hadn't felt like she could talk about her troubles for a while. She kept telling herself Bakugo and Izumi are under a lot of pressure, that's why they're being mean. But that flimsy excuse broke down every day she used it to defend them. And Uncle Toshi and Aunt Inko either don't pay attention to her or treat her like a defenseless baby. It's all so frustrating. The worst part is not knowing why. The tech prodigy gripped the arm of her jumpsuit and looked down at the floor. My host family, she opened up. They're not the best. Melissa went into a rant about how her life with the Yagis had been. Frankly, she was happier when they could only see each other through a screen. Her once close friends treated her like a nuisance. Her fun uncle went from overly concerned to barely looked at her on a dime, and her aunt underestimated her in every aspect. Not a day went by that she didn't feel like family, but a burden. So now, to learn that she had been lied to for years, that Izumi isn't an only child like her, by the end, the overwhelming frustration reduced Melissa to tears. This time, she had a shoulder to cry on, and a hand rubbing her back. Izuku let her cry on his shoulder while Hatsume noticed her new friend's distress, and tried to comfort her. "I've been where you are," Izuku said. "It starts out wonderful, having them in your life. But when you see their true colors, it's hell. Have Yagi and Bakugo started threatening you yet?" Melissa looked at him with surprised, teary eyes. "No, they're mean sometimes, but they're heroes in training." Izuku gave her a glare that significantly weakened whatever argument she had. He lifted up his bandaged hand and grazed the scar running from his nose to his right cheek. The foreign girl's eyes widened as she got the silent message. "First, it's name calling. Then they start avoiding you, then it's yelling at you for almost nothing. After that, it hurts even more." Melissa thought about what he said. The name calling. Bakugo calls her tech support, knowing full well it gets on her nerves. Check. Avoiding. He and Izumi have been distancing themselves from her more and more. Izumi doesn't even answer her calls anymore. Check. Yelling for little things. Check. Melissa breathed in deeply, placing her hands on her face and pushing her hair back. "Thank for the talk, you've given me a lot to think about." "So what will you do?" Izuku asked. "I don't know, it's a lot to process." Izuku nodded. He well understood what that felt like. He practically had his whole worldview shattered when he finally got the full picture. But when Melissa finds out for herself, she won't be alone. "We should go back to our dorms," Izuku suggested. "Yeah, I could use some sleep." Melissa agreed. "Good night." Hatsume waved them goodbye. Izuku and Melissa were walking side by side on the pathway to the first-year dorm area. The former was carrying Hatsume in a net over his shoulder. The mannequin vendor was slightly mad, but more proud that her net launcher baby worked like a charm. They came to a stop when it was time for them to part ways. Izuku set Hatsume down, and waved goodbye over his shoulder. "Hey, Izuku," Melissa called to him. She fidgeted with her hair and looked down, not meeting his eyes. If you ever want to talk about stuff you have backed up, why you know where to find me." Melissa's eyes slowly went up to Izuku's, and she saw that he had a small smile on his face. "Thanks. You too." The blonde's heart went aflutter. "And if you ever need some top-quality babies, you know where to find me," Hatsume added. Izuku smiled at her as well. "I'll keep that in mind." With that, Izuku waved both inventors goodbye and went to his dorms. Class 1A dorm. Yayorozu poured a cup of tea for each member, the group consisting of herself, Iida, Kirishima, Kaminari, Mina, Tokiyami, Asui, and Jiro. They gathered on the green chairs around the TV. Their other classmates were either in the kitchen waiting for dinner or doing that in their rooms. That was pretty intense. Kaminari started the talk. "That's an understatement," Mina said. "I get that there's serious beef between the three of them, but damn. They were trying to kill each other," Kirishima said. "I heard some of what they were saying," Kyoka said with a raised earjack. Bakugo kept calling him trash and stuff, but Izuku said he was talking about a dead person. Bakugo also tried provoking Izuku by insulting some of us. Tokiyami blew his tea to cool it down. He has a good heart, but Bakugo exploited the darkness clouding it. Ribbit, he just keeps finding new lows to sink to. Suyu croaked. On the bright side, we can probably talk him into making us breakfast and dinner for a week. Kaminari's joke earned him a punch from Kirishima and a jab from Kyoka. OWW. Too soon. Iida and Momo were the only ones who hadn't said anything, despite the former being the first to sit down and the latter being the one to call this meeting to order. From how she spoke on the first day, Yagi didn't seem all that broken up about her brother's death. It was less than a year ago that Izuku Yagi was declared dead. I know if it were me, I'd be an emotional wreck. And from watching both of their actions, it's clear there is deep-seated hatred between them. Was she just playing on our sympathy? Disgusting. Momo sipped her tea. She couldn't get those eyes she saw on screen out of her head. That petrifying glow was burned into her mind from another time. How deep do your scars run? She wondered. What are you all doing here? Todoroki came up and asked. He poured himself a cup of tea but never sat down. Are you really that rattled by him? He asked. You saw the same fight we did, right? He made everything that was thrown at him look like nothing. Kaminari shouted incredulously. I admit, he's strong. Shoto took a sip from his tea, but anything he can do, I can outmatch. Kyoka scoffed. Bakugo said the same shit, and look at him. If you're so sure of yourself, I dare you to spout that shit to his face, Mina added. Unlike you, Todoroki, he's skilled with and without his quirk. Tsuyu added. Shoto glared at the three, but their attention was grabbed by a late entry. Izuku entered the dorms, much later than the others and without explanation. All eyes were immediately on him. Skeptical eyes. Seeing him fight made them more wary of him than ever. Good. Then they won't miss him when he's gone. Without a word, the scarred boy made his way to the elevator, not directly looking anyone in the eye. Hey. He stopped when Shoto called him from across the room. When we trade blows, I won't be as careless as Bakugo. We're on completely different levels. Everyone looked at Shoto like he had gone crazy. This endeavor to prove he was better was an awful lot like Bakugo and Yagi, and they all saw what Izuku did to them. Izuku's eyes darkened. You may be half Rei, but you really are your father's son. He spoke, angering Todoroki. The day of the Devil's End lived in infamy for many. For Shoto Todoroki, he was outclassed by a random villain with a blue flame quirk. He didn't understand why, but remembering his words set him on fire. You've got to be the biggest disappointment of all. After all the work that went into you, this is the best you can do. He didn't know why some random bastard's taunts got to him, or why Izuku's words had the same effect. Neither of them know anything about him. And yet, they're wrong. I'm not like that scumbag. And my quirk has more potential than anyone else's here. If I had a chance, I would have put the Green Devil on his back myself. I'll show you what I'm made of, Izuku. Izuku went to the elevator and pressed the button. He could feel the resentment from Todoroki and the uncertainty in his classmates. He's let his guard down, let them get too comfortable with him. He needs to build up those walls again, keep them at a distance. For his sake and theirs, they have to stay away. I'm sorry. He spoke up before the elevator doors finished closing. I'll try to control myself better. The doors closed and he rode up to his floor. Everyone released a breath they didn't know they were holding. He's not a monster. Momo spoke up at last. Whatever is going through him must be hellish to say the least. Todoroki left the room at that. What's wrong, Kirishima? Shiro asked, noticing the redhead's downtrodden expression. It's just so frustrating. It feels like every time Izuku opens up to us a little, something or someone forces him to put his walls up again, and we're back to square one. Everyone in the meeting nodded in agreement. I think we've got another important topic to discuss, Kaminari said grimly, staring down at his tea. Izuku's senior girl FRA. Shut up. Kyoka glared at him, but also very curious about that. Izuku's room. God damn it. Izuku cursed himself as he finally made it back to his room and sat down on his bed. He apologized, after just lecturing himself that it's for the best to push them away. It must have been talking to Melissa that softened him up. Damn Nezu, that sneaky rat bastard. Izuku plopped his back down on his bed and placed his hands on his face. Frustration was becoming his default emotion. Hado is probably gonna call or text me again. I gotta tell her it's a bad time. Izuku fished for his phone out of his pocket, and was about to message Hado, but found a message already waiting for him. Najire. Look outside. Confused but not unwilling, Izuku did as the text said. He went to his door and opened it, and found an empty hallway. Izuku shrugged and closed the door again. I will never understand what goes on in Hado's head, he thought as he turned around. and realized the brunette was standing on his balcony with her face pressed against the glass. Izuku was completely caught by surprise. He was so caught up in his own thoughts he didn't notice her the first time. He quickly went to unlock the sliding glass door and let her in. "What are you doing on my balcony? And how long have you been here?" Izuku asked as he let Hato in his room. Judging by the foldable camp chair, he would assume a while. "About an hour," Nejire confirmed, making Izuku shake his head. "You shouldn't be here." "It's fine, really. I told my friends I had to go see the first year I talked to earlier today. And that I'd be back when we were done talking. Considering how long ago that was, she's got some explaining to do when she gets back. Anyway, did you know your class is famous? I heard that 3 of you were sent to the infirmary, 2 with serious injuries. It looks like you only got hurt in one place. Who were you fighting? Did you get angry? Did you kill someone?" Izuku didn't look back at her and just stared at the floor. "Oh, your sister, huh?" Izuku nodded. "And your bully friend?" He nodded again. "Had Nejire," Izuku began, but corrected himself. "I appreciate you coming to check on me, but you should go back to your classmates." Nejire could see Izuku was having a rough day. Those days seemed to be more and more frequent, and she hated it. The brunette gave him a hug, and noticed that he took longer than usual to return it. With that, Hato flew off from the balcony. Suddenly, something hit her. "Oh yeah, that's right. Some guys mentioned one of the first years had a pretty girlfriend. I wonder if Izuku knows. I'll ask him about it later." Rei's hospital room. Rei Todoroki sat on the edge of her bed with a mix of sadness and something akin to anger. She was reading a letter from Izuku. "Dear Mom, I hope you're well. I've been at UA for a few days now. I have nice classmates, a few of whom I've met before. Asui and Kirishima are the closest to me, but I can't help but keep them, and everyone else, at arm's length. It's especially difficult to open up, because my insufferable sister and her blonde psychopath are my classmates. It's taking everything I have to not cremate them on the spot, and they personally go out of their way to get under my skin. Yet Toshinori still sides with them. Also, I met your son, Shoto. We didn't get off on the right foot. I know he hasn't had it easy either, but in all honesty, the only resemblance he has of you is his eyes. Hope you're faring well. Izuku, Shoto." Rei gripped the letter in her hand, grief filling her heart. She was afraid of this. As far as Rei knows, Shoto hasn't had the same help Izuku had when he was at his lowest. She could only hope her sons could learn to get along, but she'll step in if need be. With her time at the hospital rapidly approaching its end, Rei resolved to be the mother her kids needed, no more crossing her fingers and silently hoping it will all work out without doing what she can. And it starts today, with him. Knock knock. Rei's nurse opened the door a crack and poked her head through. "Rei, your visitor is here," she said with unmistakable worry in her voice. Rei took a deep breath and stood up. Her eyes burned with determination. She was ready. "Bring him in," she said. The nurse left, and a moment later, a large, crimson-haired man took her place. His imposing figure made Rei feel smaller, among other things. Before her was the man who plagued her life, haunted her nightmares, and pushed her past her breaking point. Her husband, the now #1 hero endeavor, Enji Todoroki. But instead of the horrible glare she was terrified of, his eyes held emotions she's never seen in all the years they've been married. Remorse, regret, shame, maybe a bit of apprehension. "Rei, hello." He greeted his wife with obvious tension. "Enji." Rei greeted back. Endeavor didn't know what to think when he was contacted by the hospital. He almost spit out his coffee when he was told that Rei wanted to speak with him in person. Years ago, she was too afraid of him to even speak, and now after everything he's done, she requests his audience. He didn't know for certain what was going on in the woman's head, but he had an idea. "How have you been?" he asked. "Improving, reflecting, preparing to move forward," Rei said. "How are the children?" Enji visibly bristled at that question. "Natsuo and Fuyumi are well. Shoto, he hasn't said much about his school life, just that some of the students get on his nerves." Rei was already aware of that. It was time to get to business. "About why I asked you to come here." She went to her desk, and next to the flowers her husband sent her, and a bright green fern, were brochures for apartments for rent in Musudafu. I talked to the doctors, I'll be leaving this place next week, and… You want your own place. NG guessed correctly. If you're asking me to cover it, I will. It's the least I can do. Ray was flabbergasted by both the calmness and generosity Endeavor just showed her. It was a complete 180 degrees from the rage monster she knew before. It gave her the strength to push through for the last thing. There's one more thing, she said so softly, the flame hero almost didn't hear her. Ray reached into the drawer of her desk, and pulled out a document that just confirmed NG's suspicions. Divorce papers. Ray did her best to keep her body from running out of the room. She stood her ground and committed to her choice. For once, she was getting what she wanted from NG, not the other way around. The entire purpose of our union was so you could have your dream child. You have what you wanted out of marrying me. I love our children, but being your wife was a nightmare. I know you're changing, trying to make up for that, and you're not the only one to blame for our family being the way it is. I don't want to be out of Fuyumi's, Natsuo's or Shoto's lives, I still want to be their mother. But I don't have to be your wife to do that. NG listened to every word Ray said to him, with more will in her voice than he had ever heard. He couldn't help but wonder if this was really his wife he was talking to, but as he looked at the divorce papers in his hands, the answer became clear. Not anymore. Endeavor did indeed have what he was after when he married Ray, and married life before and after that was hell. Mostly for her, but now it's over. Once she has her own place, their children can visit, and maybe even discuss moving in with her. He's certain at least 2 of them would love that. Now they can both have what they want. So why does it feel someone just punched him in the heart? For once, NG put Ray's wants, needs and emotions above his own. He agreed, and still stood on his stance of supporting her financially. He has more money than he knows what to do with anyway. He faced Ray one more time and held out his hand non-threateningly. I wish you all the best, Ms. Himura. Ray's heart skipped a beat when she heard him use her maiden name. She hadn't heard him call her that since before they were married. She couldn't describe how refreshing and liberating it felt. Thank you. You as well, Mr. Todoroki, she said as she shook Endeavor's hand. The crimson-haired man turned to leave Ray's room. As his hand reached the door handle, he paused before sliding it open. I want you to know. I'm sorry for everything. With that, the flame hero left Ray's hospital room. Once Endeavor left, Ray released a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her heart was pounding. She clutched her chest and willed it to calm down before cardiac arrest would kill her before she got to enjoy her newfound freedom. Ms. Himura. NG's words echoed in her head. She did it. She really did it. After all the suffering and praying, she was free. NG Todoroki is no longer her husband. She can have a happy life with her kids. She's free at last. Suddenly, Ray's nurse entered the room to check on her. Ray, are you all right? She asked. She found her patient sitting on her bed, clutching her chest and not apparently breathing. She gave a weak smile. Better than all right. Now if you'll excuse me. Ray collapsed on her bed, falling unconscious due to the incredibly taxing ordeal she just went through. Heights Alliance. Early morning. Ah, Najire yawned as she kicked off the covers of her bed. She slobbishly climbed out of bed, rubbing the tiredness from her eyes. Another day of classes was ahead of the 3rd year. She went to her vanity and grabbed her brush the bedhead out of her long blue hair. Tending to the twisting, coiling waterfall she calls her hair is why Najire gets an earlier start to the day than most. Just as she was finishing up with her hair, a knock on her balcony grabbed her attention. Her eyes brightened as she knew who it was and what they were bringing. She jumped out of her seat and ran to her balcony. Morning, Izuku said, holding a boxed lunch with Hato's name on it. The usual routine followed. Najire accepted the lunch box and hugged him. I look forward to your cooking every morning, Najire said as she placed the box on her table. Yeah, that's what a lot of my classmates say, Izuku said while sitting on the edge of Hato's balcony. Behind his back, he heard the shuffling of clothes. Hey, so I saw a kid yesterday with red and white hair. You know what's weird? He looked like an angsty half Ms. Ray. Is he her son? Izuku gripped his pants as she asked that. Yeah. He answered. Najire didn't stop smiling. That's so cool. No pun intended. So he's like your brother. Surely, he's an upgrade from your jerky sister and bully friend. She noticed Izuku's silence, and her smile dropped. You're not wrong, he spoke up. But I don't think he'll like that Rei as being the mom he wishes he had to me. And he declared war on me last night. Even if he is Rei's son, he's too much like Endeavor. Najire nodded. Hey, you know what would be fun? We could go visit your mom this weekend. She said she'd show me how to knit next time I saw her. And you could get her son to come along. It'd be great. Izuku knew damn well it wouldn't go as smoothly as she's imagining. There's no telling how Shoto would react, and there's the potential of him learning Izuku as the Green Devil and that information going back to Endeavor. Izuku is far from threatened by the flame bastard, but the repercussions would be grave. Even with all that, Izuku had his eyes fixed on the ground below him. I miss mom. He spoke softly. The way he said that was a heavy blow to Najire's heart. He had seemed pretty down since she saw him, and thought of how to cheer him up. Hey, are you doing anything for lunch? She asked, and Izuku shook his head. You should come sit with my friends. You don't usually sit with anyone, so you look lonely during lunch. Plus, I've been wanting to introduce you to them for a while now so we don't have to sneak around when we see each other before and after school. They had discussed that the night before, when Najire had camped out on Izuku's balcony. He considered it. There really wasn't a reason to keep hanging out in secret now that he's officially a student. And the more Najire makes excuses to see him, the more suspicious it'll seem when there's really not anything going on between them at the moment. Please, Najire pleaded longly. Izuku sighed, but had a small smile playing on his lips. All right. Yay. Najire jumped and hugged him again. Izuku's head was pulled into her ample chest, the scarred boy quickly realizing Najire had yet to finish buttoning her shirt. You're burning pretty hot, are you mad? She asked with a head tilt. When she released Izuku, his cheeks were red and he was not making eye contact. And no, I'll see you later, he said with a crack in his voice, the first Najire had ever heard. He jumped off her balcony and flew with cold flames from his feet towards the main school building. What was that? She hugged me so tightly, I thought I was going to suffocate. She was right behind me, I should have felt her coming. I've evaded countless sneak attacks before, so why couldn't I detect this one? Izuku wondered, his hands on his hot face. Class 1A. For the first time, Izuku wasn't the first one to arrive at class. It was Bakugo and Yagi. Izuku saw them through the class window and didn't enter. They knew he was there, but they didn't glare at him through the glass. They didn't even look up from their desks. They looked pretty hollow. Yesterday's battle trial was weighing heavily on their minds ever since they awoke. How nobody was too afraid to face them, that they all seemed to side with Izuku, and worst of all, how utterly outclassed they were by the person they always saw as lower than dirt. Their world had been flipped upside down these past few days. Not a single word of praise, no fear or admiration from their classmates, and they all flocked to Deku. It was practically the opposite of Aldera. At least they're finally quiet, Izuku thought. He felt the thermal energy of his more pleasant classmates approaching. Despite the smiles on their faces directed at him, probably because of the breakfast he left them, he just went straight into the classroom. The class was already quiet by the time Aizawa arrived, something that he wasn't surprised by. The three problem children were glaring down at their desks, their entire demeanor making it clear they'd rather be left alone. Sadly, Aizawa wasn't getting paid to leave them be. He had something that needed to be addressed. Yesterday's class. Izuku. The underground pro spoke, the boy barely looked up. I reviewed your battle trial footage, heard and saw everything. Everyone listened with a lump in their throat, worried about how their teacher would condemn him for his ruthlessness towards the end. Silently, Izumi and Katsuki perked their ears. You have exceptional control of your quirk, now you need to work on emotional control. Understand, Aizawa finished, and Izuku nodded his head. Yes, sir. He said, his voice barely above a whisper. What the fuck was that? He almost killed us, and barely gets a fucking scolding. Katsuki yelled in his head. Izumi just gripped her arm tightly. Aizawa resumed with the main topic of the day, something that would determine the future of their class. Everyone tensed as they waited for his second dramatic pause of the day to end. You need to elect a class president. A collective sigh of relief left the class. Not 2 seconds later, several voices erupted volunteering for the position. Unfortunately, this got Bakugo and Yagi out of their slump. A chance to be on top of the class. As if egocentric narcissists would pass that up. Izuku was the only one in class who didn't raise his hand. He had absolutely no interest in leading the class, and after seeing how ruthless he can be, he was fairly sure no one wanted him to. Things only became civil when Iida suggested voting. Do it however you want, just don't interrupt me, Aizawa said while zipping up his yellow sleeping bag. Results: Todoroki 0, Hagakure 0, Uraraka 0, Ashido 0, Sato 0, Kaminari 0, Tokiyami 0, Hiroshima 0, Jiro 0, Iida 0, Koda 1, Ojiro 1, Shoji 1, Aoyama 1, Shiro 1, Mineta 1, Bakugo 1, Yagi 1, Asui 3, Yaoyorozu 3, Izuku 7. Izuku was gaping like a fish as he checked, double-checked, and triple-checked the results. He found himself standing in front of the class with Yaoyorozu and Asui by his sides. What the actual hell? Unbeknownst to him, Jiro, Hiroshima and Hagakure were inwardly celebrating. You've got to be kidding me. Izumi groaned. For once, Izuku thought the same. Aizawa woke up from his sleeping bag to say, looks like Izuku is now class president, with Asui and Yaoyorozu tied for the vice president position. Katsuki rose up from his desk, seething at the fact that Deku had surpassed him by such a wide margin. Again, as he began his tirade, Izuku had his own opinion. Who the hell would vote for a psychopath like him, me? The two immediately looked at each other, and glared. Oh great, now I'm agreeing with this bastard. Look what you made me do. They yelled. Aizawa rubbed his eyes, already wanting to go back to sleep. You three, he looked up at the presidential trio. Discuss during lunch who gets to be second in command. I, like the majority of your classmates, trust you to be logical about this. Yes sir. Momo bowed her head. Ribbit. Asui croaked and did the same. Izuku looked like he just realized something. Wait a minute. Did my cooking have the least bit influence on your votes? When he asked that, Ashido whistled and looked to the side. Sato was looking down at his desk and tapping his fingers rhythmically on it. Kaminari chuckled nervously along with Uraraka. Izuku sighed into his palm. Apparently, his mastery in the kitchen bought him enough votes to win. You gluttons. He bribed the others. Disqualify him, Izumi exclaimed. Even if that did void 4 of his votes, that's a 3-way tie, so the 3 of them would still have their discussion at lunch. Aizawa pointed out. As Momo, Tsuyu and Izuku walked back to their seats, the scarred student was still stuck on something. 3 people genuinely trusted him to be a leader. And judging by the smiles Kirishima, Jiro and Hagakure, she waved, were sending him, he knew who they were. Lunch. Okay you idiots. Who voted for who? Katsuki slammed his palms on the table and yelled. Can you not make a scene for one day? Kaminari grumbled. My vote was for Yaoyorozu, Iida said. She is calm, rational and confident in herself, and already showed traits that make her a worthy leader. Just last night, in fact, she called a discussion in the living room which. I didn't ask you for a fucking essay report, 4 eyes. Bakugo snapped. You didn't ask for anything, just yelled demands like a brute. Todoroki spoke as he consumed his soba. Bakugo glared at the heterochromatic teen who wasn't intimidated in the least. And before you ask, I voted for Yaoyorozu as well. Mine went to Asui, Tokiyami said. The real question is, did you really think anyone was gonna vote for you? Shiro remarked. I can't believe this, Izumi grumbled to herself. I can, Jiro piped up while twirling her long earlobe in her finger. Even if your egotistical boy toy did vote for you, you'd still be miles behind Izuku. Izumi bared her teeth at the perplet, who glared back. Meanwhile, Tsuyu and Yaoyorozu had gotten their lunch trays. This shouldn't take long, Momo started. He already seems disinterested in the position, so it'll be just deciding between us. Suyu placed a finger on her chin. I think there's something more we can discuss while we have the time alone with him. Agreed. Mina came out of nowhere and shouted, startling both girls. We gotta rip the band-aid off on this one. Momo sighed. How do you even approach a subject like that? He may not care about hiding who is anymore, but that doesn't make it easy. Ochako came up. Cross that bridge when you get to it. Also, while you have him, could you, maybe, ask about his girlfriend? Ochako mumbled the end bit. Mina nodded. That's a priority too. The frog and the heiress were admittedly curious about that as well. Najire Hado, a third-year student that is apparently close to Izuku. He hugged her back. That speaks volumes considering how cold and distant he usually is. Hey, ready? Izuku came up and asked Momo and Sue. He was busy finding a private place for the three of them to talk, and apparently he found one. Yes, let's go, Momo said. The three of them walked off. I found an unused classroom. It should work. Izuku said. Why not our classroom? It should be empty, too. Suyu chimed. Aizawa's sleeping there. Just as they were about to exit the cafeteria, Izuku stopped dead in his tracks. Momo and Sue wondered why, especially when stepped 3 feet away from them, saying it was a safe distance for them. Something is about to crash right into me. Izuku said ominously. Come again? Momo asked. Gotcha. A high voice called out. Izuku almost fell forward as something crashed into him from behind and held him tightly. There it is. Izuku sighed. Najire had pounced on him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Izuku instinctively held her legs, specifically her doughy thighs. Izuku. She dragged out his name with a pout on her face, visibly upset. You said you'd eat with me and my friends so I could introduce you to them. We talked about it this morning, remember? Did you forget? How could you forget? The brunette was apparently unaware of the audience they had right in front of them. They talked this morning. Wait, does he visit her every morning? Momo asked in her head. Introduce him to her friends? Eating together? That sounds like introducing your boyfriend, Suyu thought. While Momo and Suyu were watching this interaction with wide eyes, Izuku continued his conversation with Hado. I texted you and said something came up, didn't you see it? Najire jumped off of Izuku and reached in her skirt pocket for her phone. She pulled out nothing. She then checked her blazer pocket, only for the same result. You don't have it on you, Izuku deduced. Hee. I must have left it back in my classroom. I was just excited, so what's going on? Izuku rubbed the back of his head. I was voted to be class president. You were? Najire went straight to grab his hands. That's awesome. How many votes did you get? Who's your vice president? Who voted for you? Was it your redhead friend you told me about? Was it Todoroki? Is he warming up to you yet? I got 7 votes. Yes, one came from Kirishima, and I doubt Todoroki will ever warm up to me. As for my vice, it was a tie between these two. Najire looked at Momo and Suyu. Oh hey. You're Izuku's classmates. Yaoyorozu and Asui, yeah? I'm Najire Hado, a third year. So you guys are tied? How are you gonna break the tie? Coin flip. Rock paper scissors? Asui and Yaoyorozu were quickly becoming aware of the third year's large lung capacity. We were just going to discuss that, Momo said. So, Izuku's talked to you about us? Suyu asked, making Momo's eyes snap straight to her. Hado nodded enthusiastically. Not a lot in person, but we text each other every night. He said nice stuff about all of you, except Bakugo and his sister, but that's fair. Izuku glared at Najire for being so open. They text each other every night. Sue and Momo both screamed in their heads. Najire, we gotta go, Izuku said, making the brunette groan. It won't take that long, I'll probably be back before lunch ends. Najire sighed. Fine, but if not, you meet me in my room after school. We'll do it there. Izuku accepted, and Najire hugged him. As usual, Izuku hugged back. Meanwhile, Momo and Suyu had one question answered. He's taken, they both thought. Back in the cafeteria, Jiro had her ear extended in the direction of the exit. What are they saying? Can you hear? Uraraka asked. The unreadable expression Kyoka held did not put anyone at ease. Holy fuck. She mumbled. Do it. In her room. Have they done it before? How long have they? Kyoka was pulled out of her thoughts by Mina shaking her shoulder. Give us the deets, girl. What did they say? He's taken. After saying that, Jiro refused to say another word. The air was fairly thick in the unused classroom Izuku, Momo and Tsuyu were using for their meeting. The two girls weren't eating much, but Izuku had no problem enjoying his homemade lunch. When he was more than half done, that was when words were exchanged. I quit, Izuku said plainly. Tsuyu and Momo weren't all that surprised, but his nonchalance did catch them. Look, it's not that I don't care, some of our classmates want me in charge, but I'm not interested in being class president. We gathered, Yaoyorozu said. You were the only one that didn't raise a hand for the position. So then, I guess the position goes to either me or Momo, Ribbit, Sue said. I already voted for Asui, Izuku said casually. The frog girl's eyes widened, and her chest fluttered. If I could vote twice, I'd have picked you too, Yaoyorozu. It was Momo's turn to be surprised. Frankly, you're both the most rational of our classmates, at least in my opinion. Iida is dedicated and disciplined, but can be intense and loud. A leader needs to keep their cool. Todoroki is too self-centered. As for me, I think it's obvious enough. Momo looked down. Yes, it is. Ribbit. Tsuyu released a low croak. It's perfectly reasonable for you to put your relationships first, especially the one you have with Hado. Since you don't often have time together, being in different grades, you don't need the role of class president taking your time away. Izuku looked at her with confusion written all over his face. What? Tsuyu tilted her head. Isn't that why you don't want to be class president? Because you're dating Hado? Izuku looked even more confused. What, you think we're Najire and I aren't dating? Momo and Tsuyu's eyes bulged out. You aren't? They both gasped. No, what the hell gave you that idea? The girls both looked at him like had gone crazy. You cook for her, visit her in the mornings and text her at night. Tsuyu listed. You held her on your back, made plans to eat lunch together, and you said you'd go to her room later. She even held your hands and hugged you, Yaoyorozu listed. Izuku scoffed. She and I are just friends, and you clearly don't know her. Najire Hado is one of the strongest students in this school, take it from someone sparred with her. She also has a promising future as a pro, and the admiration of damn near everyone in this school. And you think she'd date me, of all people? Here's why I'm not fit to be class president. I only know how to take care of myself. A leader takes everyone into consideration, that's what I lack. To add to that, you've seen me in combat. Hit the right button, I explode worse than Bakugo. That's why I can't lead Class 1A. The room was silent after Izuku's tirade. Tsuyu and Momo honestly didn't know how to respond, but what they could gather was, while logical, concerning. His reasoning for not wanting to be class president was fair, but the dating thing wasn't. He made it sound like he wasn't worth dating. As if he hadn't already piqued the interest of every girl in their class, except Yagi. Knock knock, the door to the classroom slid open, breaking through the tense atmosphere. Lady Nagant stood in the doorway with a stoic face. Am I interrupting? She asked. Izuku was the first to respond. I've said all I needed to. What is it? Follow me, she said ominously. Izuku got up and grabbed his stuff. He looked at Momo and Tsuyu over his shoulder before leaving. Whichever one of you decides to fill the shoes, know that I trust you both. And Yaoyorozu? Momo stiffened slightly. Yes? Sorry for snapping at you. I know you were just trying to help. With that, Izuku closed the door and left. Momo took a moment to ponder what he meant, but then the realization hit her like a sack of bricks. He was referring to when they first met, how he yelled at her. Momo covered her mouth in surprise. I'm going to assume he meant when he met you as Zu, Tsuyu said. Why yes. Momo stuttered. Well, at least they know he's open to talking about his Zu persona. Maybe one day, when the time is right, they'll address it. For now, he needs space. So you're leaving Asui and Yaoyorozu in charge? Kana asked Izuku as they walked through the halls. Better them than me, Izuku said. I'm not so sure. I told you about the last leader I worked with, and at least I can say for certain you wouldn't be the same. But them. They won't be anything like the commission. Now what did you pull me out for anyway? Suddenly, Nagant went quiet, her eyes no longer meeting Izuku's as they darkened. We're going to Nezu for something quick. Izuku had a bad feeling already. When they arrived at the Chimera's office, he welcomed them in. "Izuku, so glad you could make it. Please, come in," Nezu's friendly voice said. When the door opened all the way, Izuku saw a sight that made him want to retch. "God damn you." Toshinori was standing in the room, looking far from calm or collected. "Izuku, What the hell is he doing here?" Izuku asked Nezu, anger radiating off of him. His fists were tightly clenched, shaking at his sides, his teeth gritted, and the heat in the room began to rise. "Just a quick proposition. You don't have to worry, it's not about yesterday, or him wanting an apology or explanation." That didn't seem to dilute Izuku's anger. Nezu looked to the skinny man and nodded. "Go ahead, All Might." The former #1 hero shook as he stepped toward Izuku. He had rehearsed this about 100 times, but he somehow struggled to find his words when the time came. Regardless, he swallowed his own feelings and pushed through. "Why your mother wants to see you. Tea this weekend?" Toshinori waited with bated breath for Izuku's answer. "No," he growled. "Izuku, please." Toshinori persisted. "She hasn't slept for countless nights over you. She hasn't smiled in so long. She isn't the same person that neglected you, and neither am I, for that matter. Just give her the time of day to apologize." Kana held back an annoyed scoff. "So he goes through hell on earth to finally get your attention, and he's supposed to give you the time of day just because you feel bad?" Izuku looked at Toshinori, his eyes glowing with pure malice. It shook the blonde man greatly, serving as a reminder that the demon he created was very much still alive. "You're not my family, she is not my mother," he growled. "She is your mother, despite her mistakes. I know you miss having that bond, and she wants to rebuild it," Toshinori said. Smoke began to leave Izuku's fists. He turned his back to the man and headed towards the door. "I already have a mother." Toshinori could have left the boy walk away with that, but his stubbornness is one of his strongest traits. "She isn't your mother, she is young Todoroki's mother, and I don't know how you can replace Inko with a mental patient." Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk Izuku left a burst of flames in his wake as he went straight to Toshinori, moving faster than anyone could react. Kana was knocked off her feet due to the blast, and Nezu was almost killed as Izuku burned right through half of his desk. He grabbed Toshinori by the throat and pinned him to the glass with cracks beginning to form. He tried to buff up into his All Might form, but it was held back by the grip around his neck, Izuku's intense heat and the bloodlusting glare he was sending. "Don't you ever talk about Rei. In less than a month, she's been more of a mother to me than Inko has in a decade. And if don't lecture me about replacements when you haven't told Melissa what she really is." All Might's eyes widened, shock coursed through his body. "If your cowardly, weak-willed wife lays so much as a finger on my mom, I will kill her in front of you." With that, Izuku released the blonde buffoon that gaslit him. All Might fell to his knees, semi-muscular and coughing up blood. Suddenly, alarms started blaring. At first, they assumed it was smoke detectors from Izuku's fire. But looking through the window, it seemed they had uninvited visitors. "Another problem you caused," Izuku thought. He turned his back on the former hero, anger burning in his eyes. He helped up Lady Nagant before leaving. "Nezu, tell Aizawa I'll see him at the end of the day for hero class," Izuku said, leaving no room for dispute. Toshinori held his throat, it had some nasty burns. He should consider himself lucky. Izuku has melted the flesh off the throats of countless villains, sometimes even heroes. As the scarred student reached the door, which was alight with his quirk, he noticed something. The bottoms of his gray blazer were charred. With a growl, he removed his blazer and threw it to the ground. Before he left, he sent one last glare over his shoulder at All Might, causing several haunting images to resurface. Seeing those hate-filled eyes as a boy-sized figure stood in green flames, it took him back to the Devil's era, reigniting his fear of a second coming. The viridescent flames went out when Izuku slammed the door shut. Kana picked up the jacket he discarded by the collar. It was smoking. She grit her teeth. "Principal, a word please," she said almost threateningly. Nezu complied, dusting himself off. The security matter could wait until he had conversed with the sniper hero. Before leaving, he turned to All Might with a solemn expression. "Any experience, good or bad, can push you to be better, as long as you're open to learning," he spoke to the frail man. Nezu and Kana stood outside his charred office door, the latter glaring at the rodent with disdain. I don't know whether to put a bullet through that narcissistic clown or you for thinking it would be a good idea to let him anywhere near Izuku. Nezu nodded. This was a necessary step for All Might to realize where he is wrong, and genuinely begin the long road to atonement. Kana pinched the bridge of her nose. Looks to me like that lumbering oaf won't learn anything until it's too late. But answer me this. Are you really doing this so he can see where he fucked up, or is it so you can see Izuku pay him back himself? Inquisitive purple eyes stared deeply into black ones. The air was thick around them, Kana unwavering in her pursuit of an answer. Nezu put his hands behind his back and sighed. Ms. Tsutsumi, may I be frank with you? He asked, and Nagant wouldn't have it any other way. It's because I don't believe Izuku has much time here. Think about it. Not long ago, he believed that the only value his life had was to end the incarnation of evil. As a former hero aspirant, the longing for justice still exists within him. After being abused and discarded by his family, he believes he is expendable. Not to mention how extraordinary he is. Manifesting a quirk at 13 years old, developing it at an unprecedented rate, defeating our greatest heroes. The course of his life is ultimately unpredictable. One day, his identity and crimes will be seen by the public. The truth always comes to light. Perhaps he will be hunted as he was before. Perhaps he will succeed in his goal of killing all for one, no matter the cost. I'm not usually one to gamble, but I thought he at least deserved to lay down his feelings for his deserters to their faces. In summation, there is no way to predict his course, no safe bets on his future. But in all the uncertainty, Izuku doesn't deserve to die with unspoken pain and agony. Not again. Elsewhere and elsewhen. Hee ha ha ha. Frightening those noobs was almost too easy. A young, blue-haired man with multiple dismembered hands covering his body and face cackled to a large group of criminals. This was Tamura Shigaraki, readying his comrades to strike while the iron is still hot. He turned to a living purple mist cloud called Kurogiri. Shall we depart, Tamura Shigaraki? He asked, making the villain leader smile wickedly and nod. The living mist enlarged himself into a wide gateway for the villains to walk through to their location. Tamura cackled once more. I can't wait to watch the world tear crumble when the image of All Might torn limb from limb hits the papers. Many of the other villains laughed with him. In the back of the gang, a large, dark-skinned creature with glowing yellow eyes growled excitedly. Kill. Carnage. Bathe in blood. Of the strongest prey. Its voice was as haunting as its appearance. Tamura was especially excited to try out this new Nomu the doctor whipped up. According to him, it was on a whole nother level than the failure the Green Devil incinerated. As they were about to leave, a newcomer made himself known. Is this seriously it? He asked, his voice laced with contempt. Huh? Shigaraki craned his head to the entrance of the bar. His eyes met the turquoise eyes of a slim, fairly tall man with spiky black hair and several patches of gnarly purple skin held together by medical staples. He wore a dark blue jacket with 4 coat tails, matching pants and boots, and a white undershirt. Who the hell is he? A thug asked. Tamura shrugged his shoulders. We've already got more than enough players. Get lost, he spat. The newcomer scoffed. First off, congrats on scaring a bunch of high school kids, you must be so proud. Second, whatever hole you pulled these peons out of, it'll be a decent warm-up for the pros to put them back where they belong. This comment caused an outrage among the criminals behind Tamura, some even readying their quirks to tear the black-haired man a new one. None more willing than Tamura at the moment. He began scratching himself. You've got quite the mouth for someone missing their bottom jaw. Beat it, Patchwork, before I make you. The man raised his hand. You or your pet? His palm glowed blue. Tamura had his hands ready to go as well, much like the ones behind him. The newcomer showed no signs of intimidation, his eyes cold and unfeeling. At least you'll all make good kindling, if anything. Wait. The only voice of ration finally spoke up. It came from Kurogiri, who had shrunken down to his more humanoid form in a bartender getup. Before we do anything we'll regret, consider this, Tamura Shigaraki. I have seen this man fight, he is powerful. On the day the Green Devil was captured, he defeated multiple pro-heroes on his own. He is quite capable. The living portal leaned in and whispered. And unlike the rabble, he has the strength and skill to back up his words. Also, he was directly picked by the master. Tamura growled, clenching his hands into fists as he contemplated Kurogiri's words. After several moments, he gave his verdict. If you can't hold your own, I'm letting you die. The villains behind him gasped, surprised that their new leader was letting the rude newcomer join. Said man put down his hand and deactivated his quirk as well. That should be my line. Red and turquoise eyes glared at each other hatefully. This new alliance did not show much promise. So? You got a name, Patchwork? Tamura asked. For now, just call me Dobby. Changing rooms, boys. It's too bad Izuku dropped out of the class president running. I think he would have been great, Kirishima said, with a few nods. Yeah, I thought he'd at least take vice presidency, Sato said. Iida gave his input. In all honesty, he seemed to be the least interested in the position, and it's not like we can force him to fill the role. But he has my respect for stepping out and handing the role to someone admittedly more well-suited. I can't get over how awesome Yaoyorozu was at wrangling us when we thought villains broke into the school. She even got the older grades to listen, Kaminari said. Zero nodded. Getting Sue to lift her above the stampede and making a megaphone was a smart move. I think our class is in good hands. Kinda wish Izuku was there to see her. Katsuki slammed his locker shut. Blah blah blah. I don't know how you dumb bastards can ramble on for so long. Let's just get on with today's training so I can blow you all to hell. Kirishima shot a glare at Bakugo's back, and you wonder why no one voted you. Bakugo stopped in his tracks and glared at the faux redhead. Crimson red eyes bored into each other once again. Keep talking, shitty hair, give me more reasons to slaughter you, he threatened, only to be disappointed and enraged further by Eijiro's lack of fear or intimidation. He hardened his fist and raised it. You're welcome to try, bastard. The air around these two was always thick, especially when Izuku was the topic. Kaminari piped up. You guys know we're doing rescue training today, right? Iida chopped his hands. Yes, Kaminari is right. No need for conflicts, you two, they will only get in your way. Please, practice some self-control. Kirishima unhardened his fist, and left it at his side, while Bakugo had a small hint of victory in his eyes. He huffed before walking away. I can't stand that guy, Kirishima grumbled. Changing room, girls. What? Mina, Ochako, Hagakure and Jiro shouted. Ribbit, we were surprised too. Asui croaked, having just told along with Momo about Izuku's relationship status, or according to him, lack thereof. So they're not having sex in Hado's room. Uraraka shouted, really needing to get that clarified. Tsuyu and Momo blushed at that question, while Izumi looked disgusted. What could have possibly led you to that conclusion? Momo asked. Suddenly, Jiro had 6 eyes on her. She blushed and looked to the side, not meeting the surprised gazes of the new president and vice president. Look, a lot of people were talking in the cafeteria. Sorry I misheard one little detail while having to listen over dozens of other conversations going on at once. You shouldn't have been eavesdropping to begin with. Tsuyu scolded. More importantly, Toru raised her gloved hand and yelled. Izuku really doesn't consider Hado any more than a friend. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of what they do she wouldn't do with just a friend. Momo scratched her cheek. Yes, but from his point of view, it's much more difficult to believe he's a good partner. The girls took on solemn looks at that. They had discussed their individual experiences with Izuku prior to UA, what they learned about him. The abandonment, neglect, and torment for 10 years. They could only imagine how damaged he was inside, how deep his scars run. Cry me a river, Izumi grumbled as she closed her locker. If he has company he can't appreciate, he shouldn't have her. The brunette made her way to the exit. Scowls followed her as she walked. Sure, I get it, Kyoka began with a casual shrug of her shoulders. It must really burn to have to listen about how much better your brother is than you. Izumi whipped back at Kyoka with a foul glare, which did nothing to deter the punk's attitude. Wanna debate? Okay, let's see, he outdid all of us in the quirk assessment, you had to cheat just to survive a fight against him, he absolutely destroyed you in Bakuchun in a 2v1, and let's not forget about today when he had the highest votes in the class. Need I go on? Izumi stormed out before her ego could suffer any more critical blows. The few giggles she heard made her want to rip off her ears almost as much as she wanted to rip off Jiro's ears and leave her quirkless. It was never this way at Aldera. The next symbol of peace should be respected. Class 1A was boarding a bus to take them to an off-campus facility for the day's heroics lesson. Lady Nagant noticed Momo was already settling into her role as class president as she was making sure everyone was getting on the bus. "So you're in charge now, huh?" she asked the Ravenet. "Yes ma'am, and I swear to uphold the responsibility to the best of my abilities," Momo declared with wholehearted devotion. "That's good, because I really don't want to have to assassinate a kid," Nagant said with a straight face. Momo chuckled a bit, but her laughter slowly died down as she saw the complete lack of humor on the sniper heroine's face. "Round up the last of your classmates, we're about to leave," Kana said with her back turned to the class president. Suyu poked her head out of the window. "Ribbit, we're only missing Izuku." A couple of the other students were looking out their windows for their scarred classmate. Mina's dark eyes scanned the area from the back window, and came across a mostly black and green team. "Found him," she exclaimed. "Where?" Uraraka jumped in her seat. Mina grinned at her. "Ooh, someone's excited. Is it because he's single?" Uraraka blushed and hid her deep red cheeks with her large wrist guards. "Hey," Izuku said with little emotion as he approached Momo. "Sorry I didn't come back after lunch. I had to gather myself," he said cryptically, concerning Momo. "If you'd like to sit today's training, I'm sure it would be fine. Your mental health shouldn't be neglected." Izuku was considering her proposal as he gripped his forearm. Before he could answer, the two hero students heard rushed footsteps approaching them. They saw a spectacled blonde running to them with two silver objects in her hands. "Who is Melissa?" Izuku asked as she stopped to put her hands on her knees and catch her breath. "Oh good, I didn't miss you," Melissa said between her breaths. Momo, who was in between the two, spoke up. "Can we help you?" she asked. Melissa straightened up. "I'm just here to give these back." Melissa held up Izuku's inhibitor gauntlets. "You left them at the workshop last night." Izuku accepted his tech back. "Thanks." He began to inspect them curiously. "Is something wrong?" Momo asked. Izuku looked at Melissa. "They're exactly how I left them. I find it hard to believe Hatsume went a whole day without trying to tinker with these." Melissa had a nervous sweat and her eyes shifted away from Izuku, hands going behind her back. The boy sighed in a knowing way. How much did she fight? Melissa chuckled nervously. She chewed through 3 nets. Izuku and Momo both looked at her in shock. "Yeah, the teacher only let me leave class with your gauntlets so she would let it go." "Yep, that sounds more like her. I definitely appreciate it, though." Meanwhile, inside the bus, Katsuki was growing irritated unsurprisingly. "What the hell is taking Deku so fucking long?" he shouted. "Must you always shout profanities, Bakugo?" Iida yelled with hands chopping through the air. Izumi was staring out the window. "Kachan, you might want to take a look at this." Bakugo followed her gaze to Melissa seemingly happily conversing with Izuku and Momo. "Tech support. What's she doing here? She should be behind a desk right now." Lady Nagant had gotten tired of the delay and stepped out of the bus. She knocked against the metal to get the kids' attention. "Like to get moving sometime today. You two, on board." "You, back to class," she said. "Yes ma'am." Momo quickly boarded, not wanting to upset the best marksman in Japan. Izuku was behind her. "Hey, Melissa spoke up, getting Izuku to look back at her. She was looking down at her feet and playing with a lock of her hair. Thanks for last night, the talk. I really needed it. First time in a while I had a good night's sleep." Izuku smiled at the inventor. "It was good for me, too. Take care." He waved as he boarded the bus. Melissa waved him off and walked back to her class. As soon as Izuku entered, he was grabbed by Mineta and Kaminari. "Alright you bastard, start talking," the blonde demanded. "First the third-year bombshell, now a hottie from abroad. It's only our first week, you animal," Mineta yelled with tears of jealousy. Izuku cocked an eyebrow at the two. "Melissa is a friend from the support course. I gave her my gauntlets to do diagnostics check and forgot them." This answer did little to calm Mineta and Kaminari down. "Is that why you were so late coming to the dorms yesterday?" Mineta shrieked. "Just talking, huh? Did that talk lead you to testing some new toy or?" Asterisk CHK asterisk. The sound of a gun cocking made the perv duo freeze. Behind Izuku was a visibly annoyed Lady Nagant with her rifle arm out and ready to pop some heads. She didn't need to say a word to make them sit down. With all the students seated and accounted for, they could finally get moving. However, two curious and angered passengers had questions about what they heard. "Since when does tech support work for Deku?" "She's supposed to work for us," Bakugo said to Izumi. "We gotta talk to her about this after training," she said, a malicious glare present in her eyes. Off-campus training facility. The students of Class 1A arrived at a huge dome-shaped facility, and were greeted by the pro hero 13. She welcomed them to her unforeseen simulation joint, or as she called it, the USJ. Just like Universal Studios Japan. Most of the class thought. She designed it to recreate disaster events, and they would all be tasked to save lives under pressure. They had a landslide zone, a collapsed city zone, a shipwreck zone, even zones that simulate typhoons and flaming cities. Thanks to the combat training, the students are all acutely aware of how dangerous their quirks can be, so now it was time to use them to better the world around them. A pit formed in Izuku's stomach. To him, this is the most important class UA could give him. If one were to take a good look at him, they would see a hint of guilt on his features. Aizawa, Nagant and 13 were getting ready to get the lesson started. Suddenly, an air of unease was felt throughout the facility. The lights surrounding them began to flicker on and off. The water flow of the fountain in the center was acting similarly. That was where it was seen. Purple mist appeared and expanded into a large cloud. For the teachers and most of the students, it was a peculiar sight. For one, it was hauntingly familiar, especially when he came out. "Whoa, what's going on? Is the training starting?" Kirishima asked. "Get back," Aizawa snapped. "This isn't training, those are villains." Eraserhead's words made the students lock up in surprise and rapidly rising fear. They had begun taking steps back, except for 4 students who stood their ground. Hee hee hee. A sinister cackle left the throat of the man who was first out of the portal. "Come out to play, kids," he said with wicked glee as dozens of villains came out after him. After attempting to call the school, Kana found that communications were cut, most likely a villain's quirk at play. At the top of the stairs from the entrance, the blue-haired leader looked up to find 3 pros and a student in black and green at the front. "You again." "Huh. These guys have good timing," Bakugo said with sparks coming from his hands. "I could use a few good punching bags." "These guys look like carnival rejects. We can take them," Izumi said arrogantly. "We've fought villains before," Shoto said emotionlessly. "Did you not hear me? These villains won't show you mercy just because you're kids." Eraserhead jumped down to deal with the horde. "Nagant, back me up from a distance. 13, get the students out of here." 13 did as she was told, and ordered the students to evacuate. Lady Nagant readied her right arm and pulled strands of her hair to form her ammunition. "Let me guess, you recognize some of these bastards?" she asked the scarred boy standing beside her. He nodded, eyes unmoving from his target. "Then you got more reason to leave than anyone else." The last of the villains stepped out of the living portal who held Izuku's attention longer. Second to last was a slender man with spiky black hair, wearing a dark blue outfit and sporting several piercings and patches of gnarly skin. He stood out with his, "let's just get this over with" vibe as opposed to Shigaraki and the others, who were radiating sadistic glee. However, when he looked ahead of him and saw Izuku, a wide smile broke out on his face. Finally was the most prominent visitor Izuku and Kana had ever seen. A large humanoid beast with very dark, almost pitch black skin, long arms, hunched form and having a hood out of an overgrown neck. In the darkness, its eyes glowed menacingly. "What the hell?" Kana asked in disgust. "Is that one of those Nomu things I've heard so much about?" Izuku nodded. "Yeah, but there's something different about this one." Kana looked at him seriously. "Get back to the class. I'm not telling you this as your teacher, but as someone who knows what you're capable of. Don't let them die." Izuku nodded. As 13 and the students headed for the exit, their path was blocked by the same teleportation cloud that carried the villains. Everyone froze as he stared at them. Strange. Wasn't All Might supposed to be here? Perhaps there was a change of schedule. 13 was surprised to hear that. "I didn't think villains would go after a retired hero," she said. We'd have an easier time knowing for certain that the symbol of peace is dead. Kurogiri responded. Like hell. Bakugo yelled as he lunged at the villain. That's not happening, Izumi exclaimed. Kirishima charged as well. Explosion, telekinesis and hardening at once. Wait, 13 shouted. Izuku and Kana looked back at the predicament 13 and the rest of Class 1A were in. Stop, you idiots! They both shouted. Izuku went back to them as quickly as he could with only 10% of his real power. But the Brats and Eijiro had already made their moves. Only to be horrified by the complete lack of damage on Kurogiri. You live up to your school's reputation. He looked at the back of the pack and stared at the 21st student. Venomous green eyes with an ominous glow glared back at him, and with his lower face covered, it was unmistakable. A familiar face. For a moment, 13 and the students felt secondary to whatever was between Izuku and the warp villain. He didn't ponder on it longer than a second before spreading himself around the class, teleporting several of the students to different locations. Shipwreck Zone Izuku fell from a hole in the air into a large body of water. Kurogiri and Shigaraki. They found new pawns to control, and a new puppet it seems. As Izuku took the time to gather his thoughts, he seemed unaware of the approaching attacker swimming toward him in scuba gear. Pocket knife in hand, he came at the boy and went to jab him in the jugular. Only for Izuku to block the attack with his forearm. The metal plating of his inhibitor gauntlets left him without a scratch, but he was pissed off. The villain was shocked, but before he could attempt to stab him again, Izuku grabbed his throat with an iron grip. The villain's blood ran cold as he stared into the flaming green eyes of the devil. Izuku pulled back his arm, green light coming to life at his elbow, and thrust his fist straight through the villain and out his backside. The water in their vicinity became red as Izuku pulled his fist back and let go of the villain's corpse. In his defense, he was caught in a bad mood. In the distance, he saw a stunned Sue holding onto Mineta with her tongue. The boy pointed upward and swam to the surface, the frog girl following him. Izuku just killed that guy. Suyu thought, absorbing what she just saw. Upon the ship, Suyu and Mineta were standing before Izuku. His wet hair covered his eyes. We're in serious trouble. He didn't seem very bothered about taking a life, even if it was a villain's. He looked ahead to the different sectors where fights were happening. Unfortunately, due to his gauntlets, he couldn't sense anything beyond the location he was in. Izuku. Suyu stepped toward him, nervousness in her voice making up for the lack of visible unease on her face. Zu. She used his false name, which confused Mineta, but struck a chord in Izuku. How did you live before coming to UA? She asked. The first thing that came to mind was a pile of charred corpses. He lowered his head for a moment. In ways I never wanted to. He turned his back to the class vice president and put his hands on the railing of the ship. But that's not important right now. All you need to know is that I've dealt with many scumbags in my time. Apparently, some of which I should have killed when I had the chance. He growled at the end. Suyu and Mineta couldn't help the shiver that ran up their spines. Only now did they truly begin to wonder what Izuku had to do to survive as the world collapsed. How many lives he's taken. Izuku breathed in, and exhaled, seemingly coming to a decision. He rolled up his right sleeve, exposing his inhibitor gauntlet. Guys, there's something you should know about my gear. Crash. Asterisk suddenly, a deafening crash rang through the shipwreck zone, and the ship was nearly torn in half by a massive water hand. Izuku, Asui and Mineta nearly fell over. What the heck was that? The bald-headed boy shrieked. The mourners. Izuku groaned. Surrounding the ship in a circle were 9 villains with water-related quirks and a bone to pick with the kids on the ship. Who did it? One of them screamed as they sent another water hand to further damage the ship. Which one of you self-righteous brats killed our comrade? Answer me. The ship was quickly beginning to sink. It would be completely submerged within 2 minutes. It was MMFFMFM. Mineta was about to give Izuku up in hopes of living another day, but Suyu covered his mouth before he could. In the face of this chaos, Izuku seemed undisturbed. You were saying? She asked him. Izuku pulled out a small red device from his utility belt and inserted it in his right gauntlet. My support items are called inhibitor gauntlets. They were made to suppress my power. My quirk is heavily tied to my emotional state, and as you've no doubt realized, I'm not exactly the most emotionally stable person. Mineta removed Suyu's hand from his mouth to say, You got that right. Izuku removed his gauntlet and felt a large reserve of his power become accessible to him again. He could sense every living life form's warmth within the USJ. He gave the piece of tech to Asui. "Keep that safe for me." "Hold on a second," Mineta shouted. "You mean you've been handicapped this whole time? How much do those things hold back your strength?" 45% per gauntlet. Izuku answered, stunning both the frog and the midget. That means Izuku was only working with 10% when he decimated Izumi and Katsuki, two of the class's strongest fighters. Holy crap. "Sue, listen," Izuku spoke, snapping her out of her stupor. "Ribbit. You're going to take Mineta and I want you to jump as far away from here as you can. Try to find a place you'll be hidden. 13 is fighting right by the exit, so it wouldn't be the safest choice to go there." "And what about you?" she asked. Izuku looked over his shoulder. "I'll deal with these guys." It was rare that Tsuyu could show fear and dread on her face, but it was written on her face as the words left Izuku's mouth. "I'm not leaving you. We can all get out of this." Izuku didn't look back at her and clenched his fist. "Don't you remember what I said, Vice President? I only know how to take care of myself." Crash. The boat was now completely split in two and the separate halves sank even more rapidly. "You heard the man. Let's get out of here," Mineta shrieked. Realizing that she had little choice, Tsuyu wrapped her tongue around Mineta and jumped away with as much strength as she could muster. She looked back at Izuku, who was surrounded by ruthless villains. "Please don't die." The villain saw that there was only one student left. He pulled back the wet hair over his forehead, revealing hateful green eyes. "You must be the murderer," one of them snarled. Izuku didn't verbally answer, and just dived back into the water with 9 villains chasing after him. In the depths of the water, Izuku had spears, tentacles, sharp teeth and more rapidly approaching him. In the center of the shipwreck, a puddle of red could be seen. Eraserhead was taking down every villain that came his way. It was clear to him that they were mostly inexperienced novices. Whenever he was about to get struck from behind, a pink and purple bullet impaled the enemy and rendered them nearly immobile. "Look at this shit show," Dabi commented. "Even for street trash, this is embarrassing." Shigaraki scratched his neck and growled. "You could make yourself useful instead of being an NPC." Dabi scoffed. The fact that he wouldn't follow orders infuriated Shigaraki. Another bullet rang out and a comrade's scream soon followed. "That sniper is a pain in the ass, Hood." The Nomu named Hood stood at attention like a dog that had been called by its owner. "Take care of the shooter up there." He released a noise of agreement as he took to the air at breakneck speed. From her vantage point, Kana saw the monster flying towards her. She fired at it 3 times, the beast dodging each time. He pulled an arm and stretched it at the sniper. Kana barely got out of the way as its hand crashed into the concrete, leaving a crater where she stood. Flight, super strength, and stretching. So it really does have multiple quirks. Nagant. Aizawa stared at the Nomu, causing it to fall to the ground. Its huge frame towered above the indigo and pink-haired woman. "M's Nagant needs help," Iida yelled. "I've kinda got my hands full," 13 shouted as she was using Black Hole to keep Kurogiri in check. "RRGH," Hood growled as he swung his fist down to crush Kana. She was barely able to dodge a devastating blow that would have reduced her to a puddle of blood and viscera. Aizawa saw that. Even with his quirks erased, he's still that strong. "I've gotta back her up." "Going somewhere, Eraserhead?" Shigaraki came up upon Aizawa while his attention was taken by the Nomu. The underground pro couldn't react in time before the villain leader grabbed his scarf, and a good portion of it was reduced to dust. Aizawa jumped back, his most useful gear becoming unusable at the villain's hands. "Damn it!" the man cursed, reapplying erasure to the ringleader. "You know, if you keep your eyes on me, who's left to watch Nagant's back?" The madman laughed. Before Nagant could take another shot at the monstrosity before her, her shooting arm was grabbed and crushed by the beast. Kana's screams of pain were heard by the students facing Kurogiri. "Pea shooter," Hood said condescendingly. "Nagant," 13 yelled in concern. Kurogiri took advantage of this and opened a new portal behind the space hero, causing Black Hole to ravage its user. 13 fell to the ground, unable to continue fighting. "That's 2 down." Zoom. Yagi took off from the ground in the blink of an eye, heading straight towards the Nomu that had broken Lady Nagant's arm. Shit 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 shit. You. Let her go, she yelled as she pulled back her arm, and the energy of one for all crackled around her painfully. It gets worse each time. No, wait. Uraraka shouted. Do you have a death wish? Sato yelled. You'll get yourself killed. Iida yelled. Get back here, you idiot, Mina cried. Izumi didn't listen to her classmates' words. Shut up, I'm All Might's successor. I can handle this thing. As she rapidly approached the hooded Nomu, it smiled a sinister grin. Go to hell, you monster. The green-haired girl yelled as she threw her punch and connected. A massive shockwave shook the ground. Strong winds blew due to the massive force colliding with the monster. Azumi's classmates, Aizawa, Shigaraki, and the villains looked up at the spectacle. Everyone's breath was caught in their throats, everyone wondering if that smash actually did it. When the dust settled, Azumi's arm was broken, her whole body shaking due to the pain. Her chest heaved with labored breaths. How's that? Heh. Her blood ran cold when she heard the Nomu release a sound of amusement. She looked and saw that her smash did nothing. Dread filled the students and teachers while the villains were laughing. You are strong. Hood reached out and grabbed Izumi by her broken arm. Unlike with Nagant, he didn't even need to put in the slightest bit of effort to get her blood to spray out, but too fragile. The monster lifted the ninth one for all wielder and slammed her into the floor. Izumi laid in a crater, unconscious, and blood slowly pooling around her. That makes 3. Hood looked down at her with disappointment. Such a waste. He looked at the group of cowering students and the downed hero. While the latter had her body broken, the former had their spirits broken. Hood didn't even attack them. There wouldn't be a point. He simply threw Kana away, discarded her. I've seen all I need, Dabi said after watching the tables turn. Hey, call back Kurogiri. Tamura looked at him questioningly. What, you wanna run just when we're winning? What kinda noob strat is that? Dabi could not believe he was working with this idiot. Just fucking call him. Regardless, Tamura couldn't find a reason not to. The living portal reappeared beside them. What do you desire, Dabi? He asked. When you scattered the kids, did you see one with red and white hair? Shigaraki cocked an eyebrow at that question. Kurogiri answered, yes, he is in the landslide zone, with some of our friends entertaining him. A menacing grin appeared on Dabi's face. Take me to him, now. Kurogiri did as Dabi ordered, and opened a portal for him to walk through. Fuck, I'm glad he's gone. Tamura sighed. Just then, Nagant's limp body crashed into Aizawa, and the incredibly powerful Nomu landed in front of them. And it looks like I've got some entertainment while we wait for All Might. Hee. Landslide zone. So your plan was to split us up and pick us off in small groups? Shoto asked, cold mist leaving his mouth as he stared down his adversaries. You were woefully underprepared. Seems to me you aren't the least bit competent in using your quirks. It's sad how inept you are at using tools you've had your whole lives. Arrogant, but justifiable. Todoroki had single-handedly encased every villain that came at him in ice. They barely amounted to a warm-up for the dual-color-haired boy. They all trembled from both the freezing cold and his icy presence. As Todoroki walked, he thought about what he saw before getting warped away. Kurogiri and Izuku staring at each other. Shoto knew next to nothing about his scarred classmate, so all he had was speculation about his days living in the streets of a crumbling society. Who knows what kinds of people he's encountered in his time. Shoto stopped in front of a purplish reddish-skinned man with green blades protruding from his forearms and fingertips. He looked absolutely terrified despite being twice the age of the boy in front of him. I'll worry about him later. As for these scum. Shoto raised his right hand and inched towards the already frozen man. You can either die of hypothermia, or tell me how you plan to kill All Might. Just know that, as a hero in training, I'd rather avoid the path of excessive cruelty. Why so gentle? Shoto's head snapped at the sound of that voice. He put up a wall of ice reflexively, just in time to block a powerful wave of blue flames. However, the overwhelming firepower burst through the wall of ice and blew Shoto back a few feet, and incinerated the villains that were trapped in ice. Shoto picked himself up, and saw the blue flame-wielding villain that beat him, Yagi and Bakugo, into the ground last year. If a kid could beat them in just a warm-up, there's no point in keeping these useless bastards alive, he said as he stood in the middle of the ashes of his fallen. Comrades. Shoto was stunned by such ruthlessness. And before you go off about inefficient quirk usage, let's see what you can do. I hope you've improved since our last meeting, son of Endeavor. Kirsch. Todoroki sent a wide blast of ice at the villain, but he leapt into the air with his flames propelling him up at great speed. The black-haired man looked down at the now angered Shoto. I'm already disappointed. Dabi charged up his flames, azure thermal energy rising as he stared at the boy beneath him. He flew at him with great speed and greater malice. Meanwhile, after making short work of the aquatic villains, Izuku was speeding through the water. His cold flames were unaffected by the water, and it gave him time to assess the situation. Thanks to having just over half his full strength, the reach of his thermal sensing covered the entire USJ. Let's see, Hagakure, Iida, Sato, Shiro, Shoji, Ashido, Uraraka and Yagi, all by the entrance. Tokiyami and Koda are in the typhoon zone. Ojiro is in the fire zone, with Aoyama. Why does he feel so sad? Yaoyorozu, Jiro and Kaminari are handling themselves in the mountain zone. Kirishima and Bakugo are together. That bastard better not do anything stupid and drag my friend down. Izuku caught himself by surprise with that last thought. A friend? Him? He glared and grit his teeth. Don't be naive, Izuku. After today, you won't be seeing him or any of them. Just for now, do what you can. He refocused on the situation at hand instead of pointless hopes. There's a lot of heat signatures just went cold. Todoroki. He'll be. Izuku's head snapped in the direction of the stoic Todoroki. Suddenly, the air in that area went from freezing to blazing. And that roaring heat was overflowing with hatred, although strangely, it was sort of familiar. Should I go check that out? Just up ahead was Tsuyu and Mineta, hiding in the shallow water, mere steps away from the center of the facility where the villains appeared. He decided to check on them first. The purple pipsqueak was trembling and begging for all of this to be over. The frog, while composed on the outside, wasn't faring well on the inside either. They watched as Aizawa and Nagant were beat mercilessly by Shigaraki's mutant pet, their screams haunting them. Eraserhead's arms were broken, so were Lady Nagant's legs and right arm, all the while Shigaraki was cackling like a madman. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. It's not real. It's just a nightmare. I'm gonna wake up any second now. Gonna wake up and be surrounded by big titty waifus in swimsuits. Mineta babbled to himself. What was that last part? Gah! Ribbit! Both students jumped at the sudden appearance of Izuku behind them. He was alive. He fought a whole group of villains underwater, and swam away without a scratch. Mineta, overwhelmed with emotions, started punching his rock-hard chest without actually doing any damage. You bastard! Don't just scare us like that. I already feel like I could die. Sorry, Izuku said with a sweat drop. Asui came up to him. Are you okay? Those guys seemed pretty angry. Izuku nodded. I'm fine. What's the situation here? Izuku looked ahead, and his eyes widened at the sight. Shota and Kana, bloody and broken at the monstrously powerful hands of Shigaraki's pet. Izuku spent more time gazing upon Kana Tsutsumi, a confidant he had during his time at Tartarus. Someone he came to care for deeply was suffering, and the one to blame for it was in his reach. The water reaching his waist began to bubble and steam. It became too hot for Mineta and Asui to be near him, so they jumped away from him. He looked more livid than they had ever seen him. Form hunched slightly, teeth gritted, fists clenched, steam rising in response to his scalding anger. His eyes were bloodshot, until they began to glow bright green, and a flame-like glow escaped from the corners of his eyes and mouth. Tsuyu and Mineta couldn't take their eyes off him as his quirk, whatever it was coming out dangerously. Aizuku? Tsuyu cautiously approached. FWOOSH, Kana. Only to be pushed back by a roaring blast of verdant flames. Hers and Mineta's eyes widened as their friend took off with speed only Iida could match, and the color of the flames. What the heck? Mineta thought. These flames, Asui thought. Shigaraki stopped laughing as he noticed the vengeful fireball speeding towards him. What the foo, but he was taken out of harm's way by Kurogiri. Hood was not. The Nomu could feel his extremely dense flesh begin to slowly melt in the presence of such firepower, although his regeneration power kept him from suffering lasting damage. The venomous hatred coming off of Izuku in waves was Just what he'd been waiting for as a grin spread across his face. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the central plaza shook as a massive explosion occurred, blazing heat spreading and burning some of the villains Eraserhead and Lady Nagant had downed. The blast was felt and seen from all parts of the USJ. Collapsed city zone. Hiroshima and Bakugo had begrudgingly worked together to clear out a group of villains, while also beating out their own anger, when they heard it. What the hell was that? The redhead asked. An explosion. Who fucking dares? Bakugo snarled. Mountain zone. Yaoyorozu, Jiro and a brain-fried Kaminari stood among several unconscious villains. In the distance, they saw a burst of familiar green flames. Holy fuck. Hey class prez, are you having the same nightmare I am? Kyoka asked. Momo gulped. I think so. Hey, hoo-ha. Denki babbled, but roughly translated, he said, I thought he was dead. Unless, he's the Green Reaper now. Landslide zone. As Shoto was fighting an uphill battle against Dabi, the power of Blue Flame being too much for his ice half to keep up with. Unlike his comrades, Dabi was skilled and proficient with how he used his quirk, and clearly had no qualms about roughing up a kid. The only menacing villain walked towards a bloody and burned Shoto, azure heat present in his palms and blazing around them. I seem to remember you saying something about how sad it was to be inefficient with a power you've had your whole life. The man taunted him with his own words, making Todoroki burn up inside as much as he was outside. Suddenly, the pair's attention was grabbed by an explosion in the distance, and verdant heat in the central plaza. No. It can't be. He's supposed to be dead. Shoto was overcome with dread, believing the situation had become even more dire. Dabi grinned widely. Well, it's about time. He looked back at Shoto. As much as I wanna check that out, I'm not done with you yet, little masterpiece. With that, he lunged at Shoto again, a sadistic smile present on his face. The heterochromatic boy put up another ice wall, but just like the ones before, it was a futile effort. Entryway. The students beside the down 13 could not believe what they were seeing, especially Mina, Toru and Tenya. Mina, are you seeing this? Hagakure asked her friend, who had her jaw on the floor. How? When? What the heck? Mina mumbled. Gee, this can't be real. Sato stammered. I thought he was gone. Shiro said. Iida was silently staring down at the green flames that blazed before him. He was forced to relive memories of his brother in the hospital at the hands of that monster. He clenched his hands into fists and grit his teeth. That monster still breathes after all he's done. Central Plaza. Hood had taken a blazing punch to the gut. It blew him away from his attacker and his teachers. When the smoke cleared, Izuku saw he had burned away layers of skin and exposed the monster's flesh. But it regenerated just as quickly as the damage had appeared, smiling while it did. You, boy, how strong are you? Hood asked. A large pillar of flames surrounded Izuku, as if to make a display for the monster to see for himself. Strong enough to put a freak like you down. Author. Let's take a quick recap at what's happening and what's happened so far. The pros are down. Dabi is catching up with Shoto, Yagi is down, boo-hoo, and Suyu and Mineta now know who Izuku really is. In layman's terms, some serious shit's going down. But there is a bit of reassurance. Nezu's office. Nezu was sipping a cup of tea in his office. He had just gone through telling All Might why it would be best for him to sit out today's training after his and Izuku's disagreement. As he returned to his office, he got a notification on his computer. It was from the software he used to track Izuku's gauntlets to always know his location and battle power. One of them had been removed. This perplexed the creature of indeterminate species. There shouldn't be a need for Izuku to go beyond 10% in rescue training. There's no way 13, Aizawa or Tsutsumi would push him that far knowing what he can do. Something isn't right, but apparently he's still in the USJ. Nezu tried accessing the cameras of 13's simulation joint, but to no avail. This only heightened his unease. He tried switching to the micro cameras implanted in Izuku's gauntlets, and hoped they still worked. He never used the cameras, but the situation could be dire. His screen opened up to what looked like the inside of a stomach. He viewed the left gauntlet's feed, which showed unfamiliar faces being dismantled by Izuku's flaming hands. Villains have invaded the USJ. No wonder he needed more power. But if the students see this and overreact, Nezu quickly grabbed the phone on his desk. He dialed the number and waited for someone to pick up. While it was ringing, he typed away on his computer for a different contact. The phone picked up first. "Good afternoon, Principal Nezu. What's the situation?" Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi asked. Then Nezu's computer opened up to a screen with a laid-back bird man eating yakitori. "Heyo. So, did Izuku kill anyone yet?" No Two Hero Hawks asked. "Gentlemen, I'm afraid we have a situation," Nezu said with a grim voice. Time stood still in the USJ. The green explosion that reverberated throughout the facility garnered everyone's attention, with most being utterly dumbstruck by the nightmarish sight to both sides. Green flames burning bright. "Look who's back from the dead." Elsewhere. "There you are," a faraway watcher thought victoriously. Central Plaza. Tsuyu and Mineta stared in shock, completely breathless by the sight. They, like the entire world, had seen the unique blaze the Green Devil conjures, but only on news reports and the infamous stream of his death. Never had they expected to see it with their own eyes, to feel his heat burn their skin. Though they had it infinitely easier than the villains that were cremated in his wake. "Asui, Mineta," Izuku yelled, snapping the students out of their stupor. The wall of fire in front of them parted, making a clear path to Eraserhead's and Lady Nagant's broken forms. Izuku ignited flames in his feet and took to the skies with the Nomu grappling onto him. It was clear what he wanted them to do, but whether they would do it is another matter. "He can't be serious, he's lied to us this whole time, like we'll do anything a murderer says, right Sue? I mean this is crazy, he's a monster." Mineta's incessant babbling was silenced by a tongue slap from his vice president. The short stack saw Asui with a serious expression he'd never seen from her before. Brows furrowed, teeth clenched, eyes reflecting the fire Izuku lit as her sight was fixated on their teachers in need of aid. "That monster saved our lives, and wants us to save our teachers. We can get to the bottom this once we've all made it out alive." Tsuyu sprung into action, wrapping strong her tongue around both Nagant and Aizawa, and jumping away with them. Mineta followed because he really didn't feel like being incinerated alone, using his balls to bounce himself above the multitude of cremated villains. Above them, Izuku faced the Nomu who had manifested a pair of wings and shoulder-mounted jets to stay airborne on his own. The beast tilted its head as it observed Izuku with a curious but still sickening smile. "Why do you care about weaklings?" That simple question made Izuku's flames roar up even more as he formed a large fire fist on his right hand. "You won't live long enough to understand," he yelled as he charged at the Nomu. He enlarged his own fist to match. Their collision caused strong winds that carried the fire further across the central plaza. Asui and Mineta made it past the new fire zone and ran to the entryway where some of their classmates were. As Mineta looked back, he saw his purple balls melt in the maddening heat. "He's melting my balls." Entryway. "Look. Here comes Sue. And she's got our teachers." Uraraka shouted. "Wait, how did they get past the fire?" Shiro asked. Strangely enough, Mineta and Sue arrived to their classmates looking completely unharmed. Physically, at least. They placed Nagant and Aizawa down and surveyed the damage. They were still conscious at least. "What happened to Yagi?" Mineta shrieked at the unconscious girl set next to 13. She tried taking a swing at the big guy, but you can see how well that went. Hagakure explained. Vice President Shoji came up to the frog girl. "A lot of our classmates are scattered, but I saw green flames appear where you and Mineta landed." Suddenly, all eyes were on Tsuyu. "He was in the same zone as you," Ashido shrieked. "Yeah, he was." Mineta piped up. "You're not gonna believe this, but the Green Devil let us go." Tsuyu spoke over the purple-haired boy. "I don't know what his reasoning is, but if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here." There was a fire behind the usually collected Tsuyu's words. While most of the ones that listened to her were dumbstruck, Ashido and Hagakure had a similar experience. Unbeknownst to everyone, Aizawa had opened his eyes and was witnessing the heated clash going on above them. Extreme heat and extreme strength were trading blows and destroying the central plaza. He's releasing his strength. If one of his gauntlets are removed, Nezu will know. As it stands, Izuku is our only hope. "Shoji, have you seen any of the others?" Suyu asked, and the multi-armed boy nodded. Todoroki is at the landslide, fighting the blue flame villain. With his ice, I thought he would have won by now, but the flames are still roaring. Jiro, Yaoyorozu and Kaminari are in the mountains, surrounded by villains they defeated. Landslide zone, Todoroki vs. Dabi. While a rapidly growing forest of fire spread across the facility, a sea of flames had overtaken the landslide zone with its conqueror hovered above the blue blaze. Well now, look at you, he said to himself with a smirk on his face. Shigaraki said Hood would be enough to take All Might and Endeavor at once, and here you are trading blows with him all by your lonesome. Haha. I can only imagine how the boss is taking this. Beneath him was Shoto Todoroki, who had long since discarded the heater he wore on his back. The insane heat around him was already more than enough to keep him from freezing. In fact, he was starting to overheat. If he had to compare, Dabi could match Endeavor in terms of heat. How did some random villain have firepower on par with his bastard father? To make it even more vexing, he took the time to gaze into the distance as if he wasn't in the middle of a fight. His carelessness will be his undoing, Shoto thought as his right foot became frosty. He created a platform beneath him to launch him up to the villain's altitude, and pulled back his fist for a freezing punch. One clean hit is all I need to put this guy out, the boy thought. But to no avail. Just before his punch could connect, Dabi pivoted on his heels and released two great jets of fire from the soles of his feet. Todoroki, in the midst of his attack, wasn't able to properly block, and was sent plummeting to the ground in a smoking heap. So predictable. Dabi shook his head. For some reason, I expected more from you, Shoto Todoroki. Shoto's eyes snapped open. He knows my name. Who the hell is this guy? Shoto tried to pick himself up, but stumbled. Steam came off of him as he tried to cool down the burns. He sent a glare at the smirking man above him who was far from seeing him as a threat. Ah, what's the matter? Dabi asked, his voice laced with condescension. Upset I took my eyes off you for a more interesting sight? I guess that must be a new experience for the golden child of the Todorokis. Well, if you're so desperate for attention. His heat, against Shoto's beliefs, ended up soaring even higher, to the point he struggled to keep himself from burning by just being near him. Dabi rocketed towards his younger opponent, a manic smile on his face and smoke escaping from his body. I'll happily look at you as you're burned to ash. Green Devil vs. Hood. After attacking each other head-on, Izuku and Hood were blown away by each other's attacks, Izuku clutching his right arm. That hurt more than I expected. I'm stronger than I was when I beat the last Nomu, even with 55% strength. But this thing doesn't even compare to that. Izuku narrowly dodged an incoming grab. He propelled himself around the beast, and launched a blast of searing green flames at its back, sending it to the ground. Izuku kept the monster pinned down, melting through its flesh, and reaching its spinal cord. Come on, Hood said, startling Izuku. Suddenly, its bones began to twist and mangle before Izuku could touch them. What the? You can do better. Green Devil, Hood yelled as he launched spears of bones at Izuku. He was able to dodge most of them, but sustained cuts on his costume. The bone manipulation was effective in getting the boy off his back and buying time to regenerate lost parts. You're damn right I can do better. Izuku attempted to remove his remaining gauntlet. With his full strength, he would certainly reduce the beast to a smoldering carcass. However, as he was about to do so, two large hands as big as his body shot out to grab him. One grabbed his leg and threw him into the ground, causing a large crater. The impact caused Izuku to bleed from the head and spit out red liquid. Show me your strength. Hood yelled as he beelined down to Izuku and crashed right into him. The impact caused the crater to grow exponentially, and shake the entire facility. Typhoon Zone. What in the world is that? Tokiyami asked, Koda shivering beside him. Fire Zone. The ceiling of the Fire Zone began to cave in. It feels like this whole place is falling apart. Ojiro yelled as he struggled to regain his footing. Unbeknownst to him, a hidden ball of shame was cowering behind a pile of rubble. Stop. Please no more. I don't want this. Entryway. Holy shit. Siro exclaimed. We gotta get out of here, Sato exclaimed. And leave the others behind. Uraraka asked. We still don't know where Kirishima or Izuku are. Mina shouted through her tears. At least some of us should survive, right? Mineta shrieked. Vice President, Things have gone from bad to worse, Shoji said. I've got eyes on Yaoyorozu's squad, they're in trouble. Mountain Zone. Earlier Kurogiri had warped himself and Shigaraki to a safe place mere moments before the latter was reduced to a pile of crusty ash. He took them to a mountain point far from the Green Devil's wake. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Shigaraki whined as he began scratching himself. How is that fucking bastard alive? And here of all places. I don't even know if Hood can win this now. Instead of answering, Kurogiri had his yellow becoming fixed on something. Shigaraki, look. But the man-child ignored him. Master said Hood could beat All Might and Endeavor, a couple of old farts. But this monster, come on. Shigaraki. This was supposed to be an easy level. Kill some pros, kill some kids, kill All Might, kill Dabi. But the only deaths so far are on our side. Look down the weight, why kill Dabi? Kurogiri looked at the handman in surprise. Because I deserve something today, and something, we have. Look down below. Shigaraki groaned and followed his subordinate's eyesight. Way down at the base of the mountain were 3 students, completely unaware of their presence and observing the conflict in the sky. Well, 2 of them were. One of them was babbling nonsense behind them on a leash tied to a pole in the ground. A wicked grin spread across Shigaraki's face. Kurogiri, it looks like we're getting a continue. Down below, Momo and Kyoka were watching the Green Devil fight the Nomu with binoculars made by the former. I still can't believe what I'm seeing. Jiro muttered, but Momo could, and she had a good guess as to who that actually was. She let her eyes survey more of the area, and saw Suyu hopping away with Aizawa and Nagant. Asui just recovered Mr. Aizawa and Ms. Nagant. Momo exclaimed. It looks like they're heading to the entryway. If we run now, we can make it without getting in the cross. What the hell? Kyoka muttered, confusing Momo. I just heard the devil say he cares. About us. Her voice was light, almost a whisper. It brought her back to the night she encountered the Emerald Demon herself. As she was about to be taken advantage of by scumbag in a cape, he appeared and ruthlessly murdered the bastard. He saved her, in a gruesome and haunting way, but saved her nonetheless. She remembered his words to her that night, words that would stick with her for the rest of her days. Nothing is truly black and white in this society. What Kyoka hadn't realized is that she muttered it aloud, and Momo caught it. Who told you that? She asked. A soon-to-be dead man. A raspy, high, squeaky, cracky voice answered from behind. The girls whipped their heads around to find the villain leader and his portal crony. The leader held Kaminari's throat in one hand, and a rock. Hands where I can see them, and don't move a muscle, or else. Well, to give you an example of what'll happen to your dumbass friend. The rock in Shigaraki's hand turned gray and cracks formed around it. The rock disintegrated, and he was threatening to do the same to Kaminari's throat. Threatened with their electric classmate's life, they dropped their binoculars and raised their hands in surrender. A wise decision. Kurogiri commented. 3 students held hostage. Shigaraki looked at the emerald blaze fighting his pet. Maybe this'll get him to play by my rules. The girls' eyes widened as they quickly looked at each other and back at Shigaraki. You mean the Green Devil isn't one of your guys? Jiro asked. Suddenly, Shigaraki got angry as he remembered his attempt to recruit the Green Devil. The bastard killed dozens of my pawns and almost burned me to death. What do you think? He yelled. Everything was going just how I wanted, and then he swoops in and ruins it. Just like last time. You'll never know how badly I'd rather have my hand around his throat. As Tamura began to go into a whole rant about why he hates the Green Devil, Kyoka's fear declined more and more. He's like an overgrown kid throwing a tantrum. Are we seriously gonna stand here and listen to him bitch for the next hour? I hope the others are faring better than us right now. Collapsed city zone. Get the fuck off me, shitty hair, Bakugo yelled. Not until you take a second to think for once, Kirishima yelled back. Bakugo had blown a huge hole in the building they had fought in. He saw 2 sights that triggered him, blue flames and green flames. Kirishima was holding him back from doing something incredibly stupid. I'm gonna slaughter those firefucks. Get the hell off me. You're crazy, Kirishima shouted, not letting him go. They'll both kill you. Look at all that fire, it's suicide. Katsuki grit his teeth and finally shook Eijiro off of him. Instead of blasting off to near certain death, he turned and faced his classmate with venomous hatred. Don't talk as if we're on the same level or something. I've fought real villains. Kirishima threw his hands up in exasperation. I'll say it again, get your head out of your ass, and think. You have skill, I'll admit that, but you said it yourself. These guys. He gestured to the knocked-out gutter punks around them. Aren't real villains. So tell me, how many villains have you actually beaten? Katsuki's response to that was an explosive right hook. Kirishima's whole body was enveloped in a fiery burst. I'll deal with you later. Katsuki turned and blasted himself off with dual explosions. However, just before he flew out of the decimated building, a hand grabbed his ankle and slammed him on the floor, and threw him back against the wall. The impacts made Katsuki spit up saliva. When the smoke cleared, Kirishima was standing tall, unfazed by the explosion he took. Either you stay or die, he said in a low voice, raising his arms ready for a fight. Your choice, he finished. Bakugo picked himself up, his hair shadowing his eyes. He had his hands at his sides, firecrackers ignited in both palms. The bottled-up frustration and resentment within these two was reaching its boiling point. No teachers or classmates to get in between this one. Katsuki dashed at the redhead with a ferocious snarl. That should be my line. Izuku used explosions over his whole body to stay out of Hood's reach. The Nomu was fast, but it couldn't turn as sharply as Izuku. You keep evading. Hood spoke as he manifested two more extra long arms to swipe at the boy. Running out of steam? He asked. Without a window to tap into his full strength, Izuku was forced to fight strategically. What Hood didn't know is that he was in the middle of a wide field of green embers. You wish, Izuku thought as he manifested fire tendrils from his hands and tied Hood's arms and wings up, trapping him in the air. Binds won't hold, Hood said as he broke free with little effort. They held you long enough. Izuku yelled from above. Hood looked up and saw Izuku speeding towards him, his right arm enveloped in searing thermal energy. In the second it took for him to break free, he had taken the high ground and ready to deadly attack. Flashfire fist plus explosive cluster. When the punch connected with Hood, it ignited every ember around them, sparking several explosions that damaged the beast from every angle. Go to hell, Izuku yelled as he sent a scorched carcass plummeting to the ground, landing with a massive explosion. Entryway. This is freaking insane. On top of still being alive, it looks like he's as strong as ever. Mina shouted. This was a fact that greatly disheartened Iida. Tears brimmed in his eyes as he observed just how far he was from challenging the monster in front of him. And all the while, he had no idea what he was seeing was barely more than half his full power. Mountain Zone. It doesn't really surprise me that the heroes lied to the whole world, and that they'd seek to use the Green Devil to make their own ends meet. Tamura was still ranting. If it weren't for the hellish battle going on behind them, she surely would have fallen asleep. God, what I wouldn't do for a bullet right now. But still it surprises me that he was kept in UA of all places, and that you didn't know you had a final boss like him in your ranks. Kyoka didn't seem convinced by Shigaraki's words, but Momo tensed up. Now where was I? Oh right, he dashed at both Momo and Kyoka, hands aimed for their heads. You were about die. How, asterisk, ARRRGGHH. Tamura yelled in pain as he fell to the ground in front of the students. An unbearable yet familiar pain shot through his whole body starting from his leg and bicep. Blood was spilling from his wounds. What the hell? Kyoka asked. Momo looked back and saw, in the direction of the bullets, Lady Nagant with her sniper rifle damaged but apparently not unusable. Ms. Nagant, the class president gasped in elation. Against the concerned pleas from her students, Kana forced her broken arm to fire at the imminent threat her students were facing. Blood spilled from her arm, but she pushed through the agony. Like it or not, I'm responsible for you little shits, she thought resolutely. Beside her, Aizawa had his eyes open and staring straight at Shigaraki and Kurogiri, keeping them trapped. Not a single student will die on our watch, he thought. Izuku versus Hood. The dust had settled after Izuku's devastating attack. He put so much effort into it that he was breathing hard. At his feet were the ashy remains of the ultra-powerful monster. Damn, I've fought 5 of those things at once when I was hunting all for one. At least it's over now, Izuku thought. The monster's remains were even missing its head. So close, a voice said from above, giving Izuku chills. He looked up at speed that almost hurt his neck, and saw the head of the Nomu, intact and regenerating bone and muscle. It tore off its head and threw it out of the way. Izuku jumped into the air, but had his left arm grabbed. The crushing pressure made it clear he wouldn't break the monster's grip. Ah! He was spun around at dizzying speed. They looked like a green and black blur. "D.E." Hood yelled as he threw Izuku down to the ground. His body crashed with the force to create a thunderous tremor. Cracks formed, splitting whatever was left of the central plaza in half. They spread to the base of the entrance stairs, the entrance to the typhoon zone and beneath the shipwreck zone. "Is he dead?" Zero asked. "If he is, what does that mean for us?" Shoji asked. The only person capable of fighting the Nomu appeared to have been taken out. The beast hovered above the massive crater where the best opponent he'd ever had was buried. That was fun. He sighed and looked in the direction of Shigaraki. He was cornered and needed help. "Help boss now." He flew in the leader's direction. When Shigaraki saw the Nomu incoming, his sinister smile returned. Things were looking up for the League of Villains. Until the entire facility began to shake. "The fuck's happening now?" Jiro asked. "If I were to venture a guess, something monumental," Momo said. Dabi versus Shoto. Shoto fired the pillar after pillar of ice against the pyromaniac, but it didn't matter. A single fiery punch was all it took to negate his efforts. All the while, Dabi's mocking laughs haunted Shoto through their fight. No, calling it a fight at this point isn't a fitting description. It's more like the final struggles of an opponent running on fumes. So much for the prodigious son of Endeavor. Dabi yelled over the Azure Inferno, punching through another ice pillar as if it was a paper wall. The blows of his heat blew the youngest Todoroki back each time as the madman grew closer and closer. In a desperate bid to survive, Shoto discharged his largest ice wall yet, doing his best to keep Dabi away. "This is pathetic," he screamed as he began charging up too. Flames surrounded his arm as he pulled it back further. "If only dear old dad could see us now, Shoto." Flashfire fist. Jet burn. An overwhelming blast of ferocious blue flames escaped from Dabi's open palm, burning through Shoto's final barrier of resistance and singing the boy all over. "Da!" He yelled in pain, feeling his whole body burn. Shoto rolled and landed on his side. "Stand up." Shoto only twitched, truly helpless for once. If you get hurt that easily, you can forget about beating All Might, or even a small-time villain. Dabi landed in front of the boy, smoke escaping his scarred skin. "You really think that repeating the same trick will get you further? Please." He stood above Todoroki, seeing the fading light of resistance in his eyes. Dabi raised his foot and kicked Shoto right in the stomach, sending him tumbling. Ow. Such a waste of talent. Dabi stomped down on Shoto's stomach, making him puke blood. "Fire and ice, and you can barely defend yourself." He kicked Shoto across the face. "You think you can win with only half strength? You're even more arrogant and short-sighted than Shigaraki." Dabi placed a knee on Shoto's chest and delivered a hard punch across the right side of Shoto's face. "You're so pitiful, I don't even need my quirk to kill you at this point." Shoto was forced to endure several punches across the face. Blood caked Dabi's fists, him smiling maniacally all the while. It got worse when Shoto's airflow was constricted by the madman's hand as his free one continued beating away at him. When Dabi released his throat, Shoto's face was bloody and bruised, blood leaving his mouth and nose, breaths labored thanks to the weight on his chest. Dabi pressed his knee down one time to elicit more blood out of the boy before standing above him. But he wasn't done. The blue flame wielder stepped on Shoto's left side, the one that manifested fire. Todoroki groaned as the hot boot made contact with his skin, smoke leaving Dabi's heel. His voice continued to taunt him. "Poor and pathetic little Shoto Todoroki. No skill, no will, no reason to live." Shoto's blood ran cold when he heard that last part, and felt the heat on his face slowly begin to rise. He lifted his right hand and slowly brought it to wrap around Dabi's ankle. The frost took an agonizingly long time to form. How sad. Dabi ignited azure flames beneath his heel, causing Shoto's icy hand to recoil. As Shoto began to black out, the last thing he saw was Dabi smiling maliciously. "Don't feel bad, kid, I'm doing your family a favor, after all. I'm saving them the disappointment of watching the kind of half-assed hero you'll turn out to be. Crash, asterisk, rumble, asterisk, huh. The fire under Dobby's foot weakened as his attention was drawn away from Shoto, and to the massive crater in the central plaza. A grin formed on his face as he lifted his foot off of the boy. Change of plans, you're not dying today, kid. I've got bigger fish to fry. Shipwreck zone. Bubbles from the body of water, that was partially a bloodbath, emerged and rapidly made their way to the shore. A villain with scaly skin and sharp teeth and flippers emerged, holding his stomach that had a nasty wound. He breathed in and out, great anger festering inside of him as he recalled the massacre of his comrades, and the one responsible. You thought you could drag me to the bottom of the lake so you could eat me later. Well, guess what, punk? I'm a fish, with legs, and I swear, here and now, to avenge the comrades of mine you slaughtered in cold blood. Rumble, asterisk, what the hell is da? Asterisk FWOOOOSH, asterisk. The vengeful fish man was instantly incinerated by an eruption of scalding green flames directly beneath him. It wasn't just there. All over the USJ, gargantuan pillars of verdant heat erupted from beneath. Any remaining villains were all incinerated. The mountain, typhoon, shipwreck, fire, landslide, collapsed city zones, as well as the central plaza and entryway all had devastating eruptions of fiery destruction. Entryway. The students huddled together as huge pillars of fire erupted all over, but none on their platform. This is it. We're all gonna die. Mineta cried out. No, we're not, Suyu said as none of them were physically hurt. However, this caused Aizawa to blink and his quirk to come undone. Mountain zone. Kyoka and Momo had Shigaraki and Kurogiri at the tips of their freshly made spears. That's when they felt the earth tremble beneath them, and insane heat come out in waves. The two girls had to shield themselves as the heated air set their sweat glands into overdrive. Unfortunately, this gave Shigaraki the window he needed to escape. Did he just get stronger? Kyoka asked. Suddenly, in the center of the USJ, the largest pillar of flames exploded, making the rest look like child's play. It consumed the entire central plaza and reached high enough to breach the dome above. In the pillar, they could vaguely see a humanoid figure with hair blown up and unending rage in its eyes. As that, Momo began in a whisper. It's the legendary Super Saiyan. Kaminari yelled, having finally regained his senses. To an extent. Collapsed city zone. Hiroshima and Bakugo tumbled out of their building and crashed on the ground. Just as they got up to continue their bout, they noticed the absolute hellscape the USJ had become. Pillars of fire reaching as high as the mountains, and the largest one was where he resided. He's incredible, Hiroshima uttered in awe. Bakugo took the window of opportunity to unleash a two-handed blast, blowing back the hardening user into the side of the building. Hiroshima wiped the soot off his face, pain visible on him now, but Bakugo didn't show a hint of remorse. I'm gonna kill that bastard. Your ungrateful ass can thank me later. Bakugo yelled as he took off to the biggest threat he could get his sweaty hands on. A wicked grin spread across his face. Finally, he could have revenge on this piece of crap villain for the humiliation he put him and Izumi through. Hey, devil, Katsuki yelled. Hope you're ready to party, 'cause it's Baku clock. Whoosh, asterisk, only to be engulfed in a new pillar of fire. Bakugo would have died if not for the gauntlet full of nitro sweat he had on. The explosive substance was ignited, blowing him out of what would have been his end. By sheer luck, he survived, and was sent back to the zone he came from. Severe burns covered him, and his right arm had been ravaged by the extra-heated explosion. He laid unconscious beside the classmate he attempted to ditch. Oh thank God, I thought he'd never shut up, Hiroshima said, but holy shit, he just took down Bakugo without even trying. He probably didn't even notice him. For a second, Hiroshima debated just leaving the jerk to burn, but that wouldn't be very manly, plus it's exactly what Bakugo would have done and technically did. He groaned as he picked up Bakugo and carried him over his shoulder. Don't make me regret this, you big jerk. Meanwhile, a red-feathered bird was soaring through the sky at high speeds, making his way to the USJ ahead of his allies. How are things looking from your view, Hawks? Tsukauchi asked over the communicators. There's a hell of a lot of smoke trapped in the dome. The kids could suffocate in there. Whoa, Hawks gasped as a monumental pillar of green fire burst through the top of the dome. Even from his distance, he could feel the heat. That size and reach, the young pro knew what it meant. He's going all out. Hawks, what's going on? Nezu said we just lost the feed from Izuku's other gauntlet. Hell's breaking loose again, Hawks answered as he raced to the facility. If I gotta fly into the sun again to make sure no one else dies, then so be it. Without hesitation, Hawks broke through the glass dome from the side. He covered his nose and mouth to keep from inhaling the smoke until he was beneath it. He looked behind him and saw the teachers and some students together, including Kana. Hawks grit his teeth. Hold on, Lady Nagant. Go fierce wings. Find every student in immediate danger. Crimson feathers left Hawks' wings as they went to sounds of human movement. Fire zone, typhoon zone, collapsed city zone, all evacuated safely. At the entryway, many of the students were brought to the safest place in this hellhole. Kirishima, Bakugo, Tokiyami, Aoyama, Ojiro and Kota had been recovered. They were all curious as to what unseen force had dragged them to safety, but Iida found something that made it clear. That's one of Hawk's feathers. He must be here, Tsuyu pointed out. Unlike the others, Iida didn't share her elation. He instead felt rage bubbling up as he tightly gripped the feather in his fist. Hawks, he was the one to deceive us all. He's the reason. He looked out into the facility collapsing under the Green Devil's power. That monster wasn't given what he deserves. As Hawks flew over the wreckage, he could feel the resentment coming from Ingenium's little brother. He felt guilt gnaw at him. He knows how close the Iida brothers are, nothing like Izuku and his sister. He can only imagine how this will affect him. I'm sorry, but I don't regret what I did. The wing hero made it to the landslide zone, where instead of green flames, he found blue. Izuku's blue flame friend is here. Wait, is that? Hawks saw what appeared to be a red and white-haired boy laying motionless in the middle of a circle of azure blazes. Endeavor's youngest son lay broken in the sea of flames. Hawks immediately swooped down to scoop him up and survey the damage. What a sight, a voice said to him. Hawks saw a man dressed in dark clothing, standing on the border and looking out at the forest of fire ahead of them. He was acting far too relaxed given the circumstances. Nothing quite like seeing the world of heroes burn. Hawks flew up to the man. I take it you're responsible for what happened to Shoto. What should we call you? The Blue Devil. Dabi laughed at Hawks' comment, unnerving the pro. If you wanna talk about ridiculous names, let's talk about you for a sec. You lied to the whole world, made them think that the Green Devil was dead. You tried to bury the truth, and it's coming back to haunt you. Eventually, probably soon, no matter how much you try to justify it, the world will recognize you and your kind for what you are. Liars who have no qualms about manipulating people to suit their own needs. You'll learn one way or another, hero. Dabi looked behind his shoulder at the bird as he said his next words. Everyone has to reap what they've sown, and your kind is no exception. Hawks didn't have a witty response to the villain. He knew what he was saying was somewhat true. He couldn't get away with his life forever, no matter how he tried to justify it. He just hoped it would be at a time when the wounds of the devil had more time to heal. Go, Dabi said, surprising Hawks. Get that piece of trash out of here. I've had my fill, just make sure Endeavor knows whose handiwork it is. Hawks didn't expect a villain with a quirk that was a terrible match for him would miss the chance to kill him. From what he could tell, this man wasn't like other villains. I can do that, but I'll need a name. The villain smirked. Dabi. With that, Hawks left the mysterious bastard. He won't be able to get away when the rest of the gang gets here. Izuku and his classmates are the priority, he can wait. Entryway. Hawks had just landed on the platform with Shoto. The students were horrified by the state of him. He was one of their strongest, and yet he was reduced to a pulp. Look after him. Your teachers are on their way with some friends of mine. I'll find whoever's left. A collective. Yes, sir. Left most of the students' mouths. Hawks. Iida stepped up to the pro. You lied. To the whole world. The air, while still very hot, became very thick as Iida confronted the pro. Before Hawks could say anything in defense, a strong wave blew across the USJ, almost knocking him and Tenya down. While most of the fire pillars seemed to weaken, the largest one by far enlarged slightly. They could see a figure slowly rising within it. While fear and apprehension gripped all that saw him, one undead being was elated at the sight. Hood had an excited smile on his malformed face. When you die, you become stronger. We are the same, the monster thought, having no idea just how wrong he was. He charged at Izuku, eager to see what his opponent was now capable of. Only for Izuku to blitz right through him with speed he couldn't fathom. All Hood saw was a searing green light go through him, and he was reduced to just a head. The excitement that filled him was now surprise and a new feeling he had never felt, apprehension. Perhaps he's bitten off more than he can chew. As for the Green Devil, he didn't bother changing his course, and was speeding straight to the mountain zone. Kyoka, Denki and Momo were paralyzed with fear as the verdant fireball of destruction came at them. In the split second they had before the devastating impact, they wondered if this was the end. Asterisk boom. Asterisk. A gargantuan explosion rang out as the entire mountain zone was decimated in a burst of viridescent flames. Those watching on the platform couldn't believe what they saw. It looked like Yaoyorozu, Kaminari and Jiro were all killed. While everyone was frozen, Ida's engines were roaring up. As he was about to take off to certain death, Tsuyu lifted him off the ground with her tongue. The engine user looked back at her with shock and damn near resentment. "Let me go, Asui. Before that monster can claim more lives," he yelled, but Asui wouldn't listen. "Iida, you can't fight in that heat. Your engines would stall before you have a chance to do something. Ribbit, just calm down before you do something you'll regret." Iida looked at her incredulously. "Something I'll regret? Our classmates were killed, one of them was our class president. Others were fighting for their lives, and I've just been standing here. It's far too late for that." Ida's calves roared up even more. He was ready to use his quirk to go against his vice president. Only for his engines to puff smoke and rev down. They weren't shot, he just couldn't use his quirk. He looked back and saw Aizawa looking at him with erasure activated. Iida was beyond baffled by his teacher. "Your classmates are fine," Hawks began to say, grabbing everyone's attention. "There's a reason I spared that kid, and it's about to pay off." Mountain Zone. The mountain that once stood above the other zones of the USJ was replaced by a taller, larger mountain of verdant flames. In it, 4 life forms were floating within it. Instead of being reduced to crisps, they were enveloped in a somewhat comfortable warmth. Whoa, are we dead? Is this hell?" Kaminari asked, the weightlessness not helping him believe he's not a ghost. "Shut up," Kyoka said, her voice lacking its usual snap. "This fire, this warmth. She's felt it before, just like that night, when her path crossed with the Green Devil. It was extremely jarring how, in a time of crisis, a hot-blooded killer could bring her some odd sense of comfort." Momo was completely silent, staring unceasingly below her at the back of the Green Devil. "She's felt this warmth before as well, when the Emerald Demon saved her. Just like that, the final bastion of doubt within her about her had been obliterated. She knows who it is that's helping them." The 3 of them were placed together in a fireball that was sent straight for the entryway. When the students saw the incoming fireball, they feared for their lives, but Hawks and the teachers didn't. When it landed, it did so without burning anyone and sustained its shape before unraveling, revealing Kyoka, Momo and Denki, completely uninjured. "Holy shit, that was terrifying," the electric blonde said to himself. Momo opened her eyes and they landed on her classmates. Relief filled her, until she saw Hawks looking at her with a smile. "Long time no see, rich kid." Everyone was surprised that Hawks and Momo apparently knew each other, but those questions would be for later. Up in the air, Hood had regenerated, and was staring down at the full-power Green Devil. The monster had been shown every piece of the demon's battles. He was sure that he knew what his maximum was. But what the boy had just done to him, and to the facility around them was putting his previous data to shame. In the center of a massive green flame, Izuku hovered up to Hood's altitude, the Nomu taking in his form. His entire body was enveloped in verdant fire. It burned brightest on his fists, forearms, feet, shins, eyes and over his chest in a cross formation. Suddenly, he hunched over, and a broad pair of wings, each one spanning 10 times the size and distance of the rest of his body. If one looked closely, They'd see several fiery blades the size of swords within the wings as sort of feathers. The green devil at his peak. He opened his mouth and spoke, voice coming out with a demonic echo. You wanted my best. He had his knees bent and arms behind, ready to take off for another blitz. Here it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.